What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto has a sentient scythe? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. A young boy ran through streets as fast as his little legs allowed him. He darted around a corner and hid in the shadows of an alley as a mob ran by screaming for his death. After they passed he darted out of the alley and ran in the opposite direction. He smiled thinking he got away until he was suddenly tripped. The person that tripped him smirked evilly and kicked the young boy before yelling to the mob, "I found the demon." He tried to grab the young boy so he couldn't escape, but the boy bit his arm causing the man to drop him. "I'll kill you brat," he said angrily only to find the child gone. "Just a little farther and I can get to Gigi's mansion," Naruto thought as he turned into another alley only to bump into somebody. Naruto looked up and saw a tall man with white hair before trying to run off again. "Slow down kid. Where are you going in such a hurry anyway?" The tall man asked before Naruto pointed behind him to reveal the mob chasing him. The man frowned and placed the child behind him. "Look, Jiraiya-sama has come to finish off the fourth's work," a man in the mob shouted out causing the mob to shout, "Finish it." Jiraiya looked back at the boy who was cowering in fear and then looked up at his guardian, Anbu. "What do you mean finish the fourth's work?" Jiraiya asked with a smile as a man stepped forward. "We want you to have the honors of finishing off this demon." The villager spat out with a smirk before a kunai was embedded into his skull. The mob gasped and took a step back when they saw the intense glare Jiraiya was giving them. "Jiraiya, how could you? Are you actually protecting the duh? Stop right there," Jiraiya yelled, releasing his ki at the mob causing the villager to step back with a wet stain decorating his pants. "It is against the third's law to talk about that, with the punishment being immediate execution. Now unless you want me to enforce that law again I suggest you leave." Jiraiya paused and waited to see if they would take his warning, but when no one moved he took out a kunai and released more ki. Now, the mob ran off clearing the path for Jiraiya and Naruto to go to the Hokage's mansion. Jiraiya turned to Naruto to see if he was alright when he noticed a bruise slightly hidden by his shirt. "Naruto, can you lift up your shirt for me?" Jiraiya asked, his voice dripping with worry. However, Naruto took a step back. "How do I know this isn't just a trick to hurt me?" Naruto asked, preparing to run away, eyeing Jiraiya suspiciously. Jiraiya placed the kunai in front of Naruto and took a step back. "Now that you have a weapon and I don't, now can you trust me?" Jiraiya asked hopefully. Naruto slowly picked up the kunai and took a step towards Jiraiya when four Anbu jumped in between them. "Jiraiya-sama, are you crazy? How could you give that thing a weapon? It killed your student and now it could try to kill you," a dog-masked Anbu said while the other three surrounded Naruto. Jiraiya frowned and snapped his fingers causing the four Anbu to get tackled to the ground by exact copies of Jiraiya as they placed a piece of paper on each of the Anbu. "Sealing art. Paralyzing seal," Jiraiya said as the Anbu became stiff as boards before the original sealed them all in a scroll and popped the other clones. Naruto stared wide-eyed until Jiraiya spoke to him. "So trust me now?" Jiraiya asked with a smile. Naruto rapidly nodded before lifting up his shirt for Jiraiya to see. Jiraiya looked at the Naruto's body sadly and thought to himself, "This poor kid is malnourished, and not to mention the beatings he just received look nasty as well, but I wonder why the Kyuubi isn't taking care of these as well as his heritage?" Jiraiya nodded for Naruto to put his shirt down and then picked Naruto up and placed him on his shoulder and started roof jumping to the mansion. "So why are you helping me?" Naruto asked before looking down sadly. "I'm just a demon," Naruto said, causing Jiraiya to move faster with a look of rage on his face. "Naruto, I want you to explain to me what happened to you as far back as you can remember," Jiraiya said, making Naruto nod, not wanting to further anger the man. Naruto told how his was kicked out of the orphanage, thrown out of stores, shunned, sold expired food and beaten on his birthdays. He then told him about how the third Hokage gave him an apartment and how the Icharakas were nice to him and gave his some free ramen sometimes. Jiraiya was furious and kicked open the door to the mansion and stormed to the Hokage's room. "The Hokage is busy and," the secretary tried to say before Jiraiya glared at her, causing her to shut up before he kicked open the door to the Hokage. The Hokage leaned back as four Anbu jumped at Jiraiya before they jumped back into their hiding places. "Jiraiya, what do I owe the pleasure?" the Hokage said with his eyes closed. Jiraiya walked up to the desk and threw all of the papers off of it. Don't mess with me, old man. Jiraiya said as he made clones to force the Anbu out of the room before placing a silence seal on the room. What's wrong, Jiraiya, and why did you bring Naruto-kun? Sarutobi said, trying to calm him down. Don't call him that, Jiraiya hissed out, glaring at the man. And my problem is that I told you I would be back to pick up Naruto in 5 years, and I wanted to take care of him. Jiraiya said, trying to resist choking the old man. What do you mean? I have always protected Naruto. Sarutobi said, sweating at the fact that he had been found out. Jiraiya pulled up Naruto's shirt to show his malnourished body and the multiple bruises on it. Sarutobi flinched and sighed. I tried, Jiraiya, but the civilian council wouldn't let me help Naruto any more than what I did. Don't give me that bull, Jiraiya said, crossing his arms. What do you mean, Jiraiya? Are you saying Gigi could have helped me more than he did? Naruto asked, speaking up for the first time. Naruto, the position of Hokage is a dictatorship, so he could have overridden the council. Jiraiya said as he picked Naruto up again. We are leaving Sarutobi and I will not be stopped, he said before leaving through the window. I hope that he is better off with you, Jiraiya, Sarutobi sighed before he decided that he would try to help them out as much as possible. With Jiraiya and Naruto, Jiraiya held Naruto's hand as they walked into a weapons shop. The weapons clerk smiled at Jiraiya until he saw Naruto. He smiled sadly at the boy and walked into the back room. Jiraiya let Naruto look at weapons to find one he liked while he restocked on kunai but kept a close eye on him. Naruto was looking at a staff when a girl walked up to him and smiled. Naruto looked at the girl that looked to be about his age curiously, and saw what she was wearing. She wore a pink Chinese top with black leggings and her hair was styled like a panda's ears. Hi, my name is Tenten, what's your name? Naruto smiled and stuck out his hand and smiled at Tenten. My name is Naruto Uzumaki and I'm going to be the next Hokage. He shouted as the girl looked him over. I don't think you can be the next Hokage. Tenten said as Naruto sat in the corner drawing circles in the ground. I was saying I don't think you can be Hokage without a good weapon. She explained, patting his shoulder. Naruto perked up at hearing that. Really? Well, Tenten-chan, do you think that you can help me find a good weapon? Naruto asked, grabbing her hand. Tenten blushed and nodded shyly, causing Naruto to smile bigger and pull her through the store. What kind of weapon do you think I need, Tenten-chan? Tenten stopped blushing and went into salesperson mode. Well, Naruto-kun, what are you looking for? Naruto stopped and took a thinking position, making Tenten giggle at his actions. I need something that will scare bad people and a longer reach than a sword, Naruto explained, slightly scared when her eyes had a spark in them. That sounds like a weapon we have, Naruto-kun, she explained as she pulled him to the back of the store quickly. She threw back a curtain, making Naruto's eyes bulge out. Like it, Naruto-kun? It looks so cool. What exactly is it? Naruto asked, rubbing the back of his head. He looked at the weapon that had a long curved blade at the end of a 7-foot pole made of ebony wood with green runes all over it. This is called a scythe, Naruto-kun. It has a long reach and this scythe has some functions that I'll get to San to show you. She explained as she called her father to come over to the weapon. What is it, Tenten-chan? Her dad asked as he walked over to them with Jiraiya. Naruto-kun wants to see this weapon, daddy, can you show him how it works? She said while giving him an sulfur monosulfide class jutsu. The puppy dog eye jutsu. Her dad sighed. He took the weapon off its mantle and escorted them to the training area behind the store. This weapon is one of a kind as the person who made it disappeared shortly after making it. The first feature, he said as he spun the scythe, then separated it in half, making it separate smaller scythes, is that it can separate into smaller sickles. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow at that. Is there anything else it can do? It can be collapsed for easier storage and the blades are made out of chakra metal for more durability. He explained while Jiraiya nodded. Well, Naruto, do you want to get the scythe? Jiraiya asked, looking down to see him with stars in his eyes. Jiraiya's sweat dropped before pulling out his wallet. How much for this plus all of the other purchases? Tenten's dad brought them up to the checkout and run up the 10 sets of kunai and shuriken, 5 large bottles of ink, 5 packages of sealing paper and the scythe. Jiraiya, why do you need all that stuff? Naruto asked as he saw the multitude of ninja supplies. I am going to train you to become a ninja, Naruto. Jiraiya explained to Naruto, making him jump for joy. Naruto in his state of happiness hugged the closest thing to him, which happened to be Tenten, making the girl blush wildly. Tenten's dad smiled, then coughed to get everyone's attention. The total will be 81,850 yen, he said, making Jiraiya pale. He watched as Jiraiya looked into his wallet and then smiled sheepishly. Jiraiya leaned into Tenten's dad and whispered, "I happen to have the newest edition of my books which have not been released on the market. How about I give you a signed copy and you give me a discount?" Jiraiya-san's books are worth a fortune, so if I can get one signed, he thought before he smiled. "I'm sorry, I meant your total is 11,000 yen?" he asked, to which Jiraiya nodded and paid him while slipping him a book. Naruto glanced at the book but ignored it and looked at his new weapon in awe. Jiraiya picked up the scythe and was about to seal it but thought about it and gave it to Naruto to hold. Naruto smiled and grabbed the weapon and instantly fell to the ground. He struggled to pick it up before he smiled and separated it into its dual wield from and placing them on his back. Naruto and Jiraiya waved goodbye to Tenten and her dad and started walking to the gate. "Thanks for getting this weapon for me, Jiraiya-sensei," Naruto exclaimed, making him chuckle. "You are welcome, Naruto, but let's go ahead and get you some clothes, and then we can get some flowers." "Sound like a plan?" Jiraiya asked as he guided them to a shinobi clothes store. "Why do we need flowers?" Naruto asked, looking at Jiraiya, who had a far-off expression on his face. "Just to visit a couple people," Jiraiya said, putting an end to that topic as they entered the store. "All right, Naruto, what colors would you like?" "Orange and blue," Naruto shouted as he gave a foxy grin, making Jiraiya sigh. "Naruto, you want to be a shinobi, right?" he asked, making Naruto nod. "Then would orange and blue be the best colors for sneaking around?" Jiraiya explained as Naruto frowned. "Then what about black and green like my weapon?" he asked, making Jiraiya nod as they went and picked out some clothes. Naruto went into the dressing room and walked out with a black hoodie with a green leaf on the front and black combat jeans with green shinobi sandals. "How do you like those, Naruto?" Jiraiya asked as he looked over their choices one last time. "I like it, but did we have to get the ones that were a size bigger than me?" Naruto said as he held out his arms to show the overlap. "You will grow into it, so it saves money in the end," Jiraiya said as they paid for their purchases and went to the flower shop to get some flowers. "I'm sorry I failed you, Minato, Kushina, but I promise I will raise Naruto like I should have 5 years ago," Jiraiya thought while smiling at Naruto, who was humming some song as they walked faster to escape the villagers who were trying to not glare openly at Naruto. They entered the flower shop as Jiraiya thought he might kill someone for glaring at his godson. Naruto walked in but collided with a blonde-haired girl about his age. "Ow, sorry about that," Naruto apologized as he got up and helped the girl to her feet. "My name is Naruto, what is yours?" The girl smiled at Naruto since he helped her up. "My name is Ino and I'm sorry for running into you as well," she said before she ran out of the store to a girl with pink hair before they walked off together giggling. Naruto's sweat dropped before shrugging his shoulders and walking into the store. "Welcome, how may we owe it's you, didn't I tell you not to come here again?" a woman shouted before she got a broom as Naruto sighed and stepped behind Jiraiya. The woman was about to glare at the man who helped Naruto before she saw the intense glare from Jiraiya. "What was that?" Jiraiya said, lacing every word with venom, making the woman shrink and run behind the counter. "And nothing, just take what you want and get out," she yelled as she ran upstairs to get her husband. Jiraiya sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose as Naruto grabbed a bouquet of lotus flowers before they left to go to the memorial stone. "Jiraiya-san, what is this stone for?" Naruto asked as Jiraiya motioned for him to place the flowers down. Jiraiya sent a sad look to the stone and rubbed Naruto's head. "This stone is used to honor the memory of the ninja who lost their lives in combat," Jiraiya said, making Naruto widen his eyes. Jiraiya sighed and smiled at the young boy's intelligence. "Yes, Naruto, your parents' names are on here. See, can you point them out to me?" Naruto asked as he had a few tears forming on his eyes. "I can't point out your father's name until you are older, but know he loved you very much," he explained, getting a nod from Naruto. "Your mother's name is Kushina Uzumaki," he said as Naruto scanned the rock for his mother's name. "Kushina Uzumaki, so I do have a mother," Naruto thought excitedly as tears began to fall. "That means my last name isn't some random one. Thank you, Jiraiya-san," He shouted, hugging Jiraiya, wetting his shirt. However, Jiraiya didn't care seeing the blonde's happiness. After some time, Naruto calmed down and Jiraiya led him to the village gates. Now, Naruto, you do know if you leave with me you are going to be gone for a very long time, right? You are going to be gone a long time, so are you sure you want to do this? Jiraiya explained, making Naruto to look up to the sky, thinking carefully. I am sure I want to go, Jiraiya-san. Naruto said, looking into Jiraiya's eyes, making the old man smile. He sure is his father's son, he thought happily before he nodded and then led them off on the trail. Naruto turned back to his home one last time and thought, just you wait, Konoha, Naruto Uzumaki is gonna come back stronger than ever. This time I will not be getting pushed around, Datbayo. So Jiraiya-san, when are we going to start my training? Naruto asked as he traced the scythe on his back. I bet I am going to learn all kinds of cool jutsus, thought Naruto excitedly as he saw Jiraiya looking around. Maybe Jiraiya can teach the Yodaime's jutsu. What was it, Risuga? Alright Naruto, before we start your training let's go to the hot spring to relax and unwind. Jiraiya said, getting a perverted grin on his face. Naruto looked sad for a moment but nodded at the old man's words. So what am I going to be learning first? Naruto asked, trying to make small talk as they made their way to the hot springs. A jutsu that can make earthquakes? How to make a dragon out of water? A jutsu that can duplicate me and would be great for learning? Naruto listed, getting Jiraiya to raise an eyebrow to the last one. Naruto, how do you know about that last one? Jiraiya asked, trying to get as much information as possible. An Anbu tried tell me about that jutsu when I was 3 but I got chased by the villagers before he could show me. Naruto said, getting Jiraiya to freeze in his tracks. What did his mask look like, Naruto? Jiraiya asked fearfully. It was blank with some weird writing on it. Naruto said as he drew the symbol into the dirt as he remembered it. Root, so that old snake Danzo has an interest in Naruto. Does this mean he knows about Naruto's secret? Jiraiya thought before forcing a smile on his face. Alright Naruto, after the hot springs I can teach you some jutsus. Naruto tilted his head to the side. Why are you so insistent on going to the hot springs? Naruto asked before seeing the grin on Jiraiya's face, making him want to beat the man. Well boy, I am going to show you the wonders of the world. Jiraiya explained as they both unclothed and entered the springs. Somewhere in a random village, a woman in her late 30s with blonde hair and pigtails reaching her lower back sneezed. Why do I feel like I want to throttle Jiraiya? He is probably doing something perverted again, she thought as she destroyed the glass in her hand. Are you okay, Lady Tsunade? A brunette woman in her early 20s asked, backing up slightly. The blonde woman Tsunade jumped out of her chair and stormed out of the shop with the brunette following behind her. Shizune, we are going to kill that teammate of mine. With Jiraiya and Naruto. Jiraiya next to a fence, writing furiously into his notepad while giggling quietly. Naruto was glaring at him from behind since he figured out what the perverted old man was doing. Skip my training to peek at some girls, huh? Well, you will get what's yours, perverted old man, Naruto thought before he found a rather thick stick. He quietly walked behind Jiraiya and pulled the stick behind and above his head. He spread his legs slightly apart before counting in his head. I'll give him a chance. 1, 2, 3, 4. Naruto screamed, swinging the stick straight into Jiraiya's jewels, hitting the man over the fence, making him land in the middle of the women's hot spring. Ladies, watch out! Jiraiya shouted out before taking a defensive stance, making the ladies slightly worried. There is a pervert on the other side of the fence. I tried to take him out but he got me when I was distracted. You can still get him if you go now. Jiraiya explained while mentally patting himself on his back for his performance when the women marched to the men's side with glares on their face. Who was trying to peek? Someone yelled out angrily before they only saw a 3-year-old there. Ah, he is so cute. Someone said. Well, if he was trying to peek then let's bath with him. Someone suggested. What? He is a guy though. Someone yelled, going red in the face. He is about 3, it's not like he is some 60-year-old man. Someone said, making the women agree and take Naruto, who was blushing, into the women's side. Jiraiya was slack-jawed when he saw the women take Naruto into the women's section. I thought they would scold him or let him go. That lucky brat, I should try that sometime. Jiraiya thought while crying anime tears, making some women who were still outside glare at him, cracking their knuckles. Half an hour later, Naruto walked out of the hot springs red-faced while the women giggled at him. "Bye Naruto-kun, come visit us again sometime," they said waving while Naruto waved back still blushing. "Girls are weird," Naruto thought, pushing his thoughts to the side when he saw his flattened sensei on the ground. "Serves you right Arrow Sennin," Naruto said while Jiraiya started crying again. "Damn it, first Kushina called me that, now her son is going to?" Jiraiya sighed and picked himself up before leading Naruto to the woods to begin his training. "Where are we going to sleep?" Naruto asked when they arrived. "We are going to camp outside," explained Jiraiya. "Naruto, what we are going to do first is increase your physical strength." "Why would we do that?" "I want to learn cool jutsus," Naruto said, crossing his arms and puffing out his cheeks. Jiraiya sighed and ruffled his hair. "Chakra is made up of two parts. One part is spirit and the other part is body. We can work on spirit later since I don't want your chakra control to be messed up like a certain pink-haired councilwoman's mind is. In order to work on body we need to do what it implies. We need to train your body, so that means no more ramen," Jiraiya said before he stopped as the air dropped a couple of degrees. "What did you just say?" Naruto calmly asked, making Jiraiya take a step back from the boy's aura. He could have sworn he saw some masked figure behind him. Alright, you can have ramen once a month," Jiraiya said before the aura got darker. Once every 2 weeks?" he asked, not receiving an answer. "Fine, 3 times a week, but that is as high as I am going to go," he shouted, and thankfully the aura left as quickly as it had come. "Okay Arrow Sennin, that sounds good. So how are we going to train my body?" Naruto asked as he saw Jiraiya pull out an ink pen. "Since you are too young for weights and I think they are too old school, I am going to draw a gravity seal on you," he said, making Naruto raise an eyebrow to him. "What this seal are made for is, they will link directly to your chakra and will increase the amount proportionally to how tuned your chakra is to the physical aspect," Jiraiya explained, and saw a blank look on Naruto's face, making him face palm as he remembered he was talking to a 3-year-old. "So the stronger I get the more weight they will have?" Naruto asked, surprising Jiraiya. Exactly Naruto. How did you know that?" "Gigi used to give me some books with a spiral on the back and he told me that only I could read them since they were a super important ninja secret," Naruto explained while Jiraiya had a frown on his face. "Could you teach me how to do it, Arrow-sensei?" Naruto said, pulling out the book from his backpack. Jiraiya grabbed the book and looked through it before gasping mentally. "These are Uzumaki seals, these are so much more complicated than anything I could come up with," Jiraiya thought before smiling at Naruto. "Alright Naruto, but on one condition. I'll teach you, but in return I can learn from the book as well," Jiraiya said, making Naruto think about it for a little bit. "Alright, I don't see anything wrong with that," Naruto said as he and Jiraiya shook hands. "Alright, now that we have that settled, I want you to do 50 push-ups and sit-ups, then run around the lake for 10 laps. "Are you crazy?" Naruto shouted. "There is no way a 3-year-old can do that," Naruto said, starting to pout. Jiraiya merely hummed and formed a hand seal, making an earth clone who activated Naruto's seals. "Better get started or my clone might give you a little incentive," he said as his clone pulled out some shuriken, grinned evilly, making Naruto sweat. Naruto flopped to the ground and started to do some push-ups, making Jiraiya nod and look back at the book. Corruption Van huh? That sounds like it would be a good attack. Too bad it's so damn hard to translate," Jiraiya thought as he started reading the complicated seal. 2 months later in Konoha. The entire village was in celebrations as there seemed to be festivities everywhere. People were walking around with large smiles on their faces. There were a large amount of people in front of an apartment laughing as they burned the place to the ground. In the middle of the village there was the Hokage looking out with disappointment clear in his eyes. He turned back to the gathered people and decided to continue the meeting. "I apologize for the delay," he started as he sat down. "It appears that the villagers thought it would be good to get rid of the last of Naruto-kun's things," he finished with a sigh. "Should we reimburse Uzumaki-san?" A man with long blonde hair pushed back in a ponytail asked. "Inoichi-san, if we were to reimburse Uzumaki-san, Konoha would definitely be bankrupt when he returned," said a man that wore a long coat with a hood that covered his face and sunglasses on his eyes. "I don't see what is so special about the brat. It's not like he is the only one that suffered in the world," said a person on the civilian side of the council. A woman with pink hair sighed and stood to her feet. Hokage-sama, I feel that we should do everything we can to try to get on Uzumaki-san's good side, she said, making the entire council look at her in shock. Mebuki-san, are you feeling okay? The Hokage asked, making her a little irritated. The civilian council was about to start yelling at the woman who had been a key supporter in denying Naruto proper supplies, but stopped when they saw she was going to explain herself. Think about this, fellow councilmen and women. What if your own child was in his shoes? Would you want them beaten on their birthday every year? Would you deny them food? Try to stop them from getting an education? She paused, looking to see she had the entire council's attention. If this was my daughter, I would not want her to suffer through this fate. I will now try to help Uzumaki-san as much as I can. I can't believe you, Mebuki, a civilian shouted, slamming the table, getting the shinobi side to glare at him. Our child does not carry the spawn of our nightmares. We should be glad he is gone, and when he comes back we should treat him worse so he stays gone, he said, getting a few nods. A woman with a wild mane of brown hair chuckled to herself, getting the man to glare at her. What is so funny, Sume Inazuki? He asked, growling at her as she was not popular in the council, at least on the civilian side. Hokage-sama, may I? She asked, getting a nod from the Hokage before she stood up. You call him a demon, right? You abuse him, and deny him all these things. I have 2 questions for you. Do you trust in the Yodaime seals? She asked before the council erupted in a frenzy. Quiet, Sarutobi yelled out, using chakra to enhance his voice. You will let Inazuki-san finish her statement, he said strongly before nodding to her to continue. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Now my second question. What is stopping him from unleashing the demon inside the village? She asked, causing everyone to freeze at the thought of such a thing happening. Sarutobi looked around and saw everyone was frozen despite his 2 teammates, and decided to adjourn the meeting. I hope you are doing all right, Naruto-kun, he thought sadly before going back into his office to deal with the bane of cages. His paperwork. With Naruto and Jiraiya. Naruto sneezed as he finished his push-ups and stood up quickly. He turned to see a boulder twice the size of Jiraiya. He ran at the boulder and punched it, using chakra to enhance it last second. Jiraiya looked up from the book and watched as his fist made contact and the boulder remained whole. Better luck next time, Gaki, he said before he saw Naruto smirk. He was about to question it before he saw the boulder explode into tiny pieces. Jiraiya whistled at the sight as he stood up. Not bad, Naruto. Did you finally get the shadow clone jutsu down? No, arrow senin, I didn't get it, he said, making Jiraiya raise an eyebrow since his smirk never left. I learned something much better. I got the mass shadow clone jutsu, he said, making Jiraiya twitch as he sighed at the blonde's antics. Whatever you say. Anyway, today we are going to start your jutsu training with clones while you and I focus on your spiritual aspect, he said, getting a nod from Naruto. First we have to find your elemental nature and we will work from that. He handed Naruto a piece of paper. What is the paper for? Naruto said as he flipped it over and tried to see if something was on the back. This is chakra paper. It is grown through some method that I don't feel like explaining since I don't know all of it, he said, making Naruto's sweat drop. Channel chakra into the paper and watch what happens. Naruto nodded and did as he was told. Naruto watched in amazement as his paper split in 3 parts and one section became crumpled, another became damp, and the last became ashes. Jiraiya nodded and turned away to get his notepad to write down what he saw. Naruto kept looking as he saw the remains of the paper swirled together and make a skull before it ignited in green flames and flew away on the wind. Arrow senin, what was that? Naruto asked as he watched his palm in amazement. What was what, Gaki? Did you not see the paper? Naruto asked and was about to explain what he saw until he heard a voice. Calm down. All will be explained shortly, a voice said in his mind, making Naruto look around for who said it. He decided to listen to the voice since he had no reason not to. Jiraiya whistled, pulling Naruto out of his thoughts. Well, Naruto, it appears you have 4 elements, he said, making Naruto's eyes light up. Your primary is wind, so wind jutsus will be strongest and easiest to learn. You have a secondary for lighting, water, and fire. The lighting is probably from your dad, the water from your mom, and the fire from. He paused, making Naruto look at him strangely. I can't remember, Jiraiya said, rubbing the back of his head and hoped the blonde bought it, which he did. It's way too soon to tell him about the Kyuubi. Anyway, what did I have to find that out for? Naruto asked as Jiraiya scratched his chin. How many clones do you think you can make without feeling tired, Gaki? Jiraiya asked while Naruto wondered why he would ask that. Since we started training, I can make around 300 without feeling tired. Naruto said while Jiraiya nodded and made 6 clones. Alright Gaki, today I am going to start teaching you some jutsu and chakra control. I want you to divide your clones in 6 groups and stand in front of the clones. Jiraiya ordered as Naruto nodded and relayed the orders to the clones. Alright, the first group would work on tree walking, he said as the first group jumped off to another part of the forest. The second, third, fourth, and fifth group will work on elemental chakra control and the last group will work on fuinjutsu. He said as the other groups separated to do their own tasks. Then what am I supposed to do, Arrow Sennin? Naruto asked as Jiraiya ruffled his hair and smiled. I am going to teach you an art perfect for patience, collating one's thoughts and getting in touch with your chakra. Jiraiya explained as Naruto envisioned himself on a cliff with all 4 elements around him. What is it called? Naruto asked, unable to hide his excitement. Meditation, Naruto. Jiraiya said as Naruto wondered what that was. Meditation is when one sits absolutely still, becoming one with nature. Jiraiya explained as Naruto flopped down on the ground. Man, that sucks more than a hooker, Arrow Sennin, Naruto exclaimed as Jiraiya became irritated at the boy's language. Jiraiya punched Naruto's head hard enough to hurt but not enough to bruise the blonde. Language, Gaki, Jiraiya shouted while Naruto rubbed his new bruise. I don't know why you won't let me curse, Arrow Sennin, ninja do it all the time. Naruto stated as he pouted. Jiraiya sighed and placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto, ninja do a lot of things they don't want to, but that doesn't mean that it's okay for a child to curse. Also, it's not polite to curse in front of a woman or kids. Jiraiya explained, but Naruto still pouted, not understanding what was so wrong with cursing. Anyway, back to training, I'll make you a deal. Jiraiya proposed and instantly got Naruto's attention. Jiraiya smiled and continued. If you can meditate until I tell nighttime, then I will buy you all the ramen you want for 3 days. Jiraiya said, making Naruto's eyes gleam at the thought of that much ramen. Arrow Sennin, you got a deal. Naruto stated as he shook Jiraiya's hand. Congratulations, you just doomed your wallet to starvation. Naruto chuckled as Jiraiya thought for a second, then started crying anime tears at what he just did. That's only if you can meditate for 7 hours straight. Jiraiya stated with a smirk, since he knew Naruto would never back down from a challenge. Naruto scoffed before he sat on the ground in a lotus position and closed his eyes. Jiraiya smiled and sat under a nearby tree and pulled out the book that has held his fascination for quite a while. I've almost got this seal figured out, thought Jiraiya with a smirk. From what I understand, it grants whoever it was placed on an enormous amount of knowledge and power for a short while. That would be useful in fighting stronger opponents. Jiraiya thought, proud of himself, and turned the page, unaware of the page he skipped in his excitement. Naruto calmed his breathing and tried extending his senses. He could feel Jiraiya next to him and the wildlife all around him. So this is what it's like to be tuned to nature. It feels so peaceful. Naruto thought before he felt a tug on his mind. He was about to panic before he felt himself fall into a puddle of water. Where the heck am I? Naruto asked himself as he looked around at his surroundings. He saw he was in some kind of sewer with small patches of dirt with flowers everywhere. He looked up and saw some pipes. He saw a fairly large pipe with some kind of dull blue flowing through it. That must be my chakra, he thought before he saw a pipe that dwarfed the blue one. This pipe had blood-red liquid flowing through it. He was about to question what it was until he saw a slightly smaller pipe with purple liquid running through it. Naruto decided to just find out where they lead to and walked in the direction that the liquid was flowing. After what felt like an hour of walking, Naruto walked up to what seemed to be the bars of an enormous cave. Naruto stared at the cage in shock. Oh Kami, this can only mean one thing, Naruto said as he dropped to his knees. I have a giant pervert living inside me, he said, crying anime tears as he imagined a giant Jiraiya in the cage. He heard a loud rumbling and saw a red spot in the distance. Naruto walked forward a bit to get a better look until he saw the red spot growing rather quickly. He jumped back just in time as a red claw slammed where he was before. He was about to yell at the bearer of the claw until purple chains flew out of the sides of the cage and held the beast in place. The beast roared at the chains as a robed figure flew out of the ground with bone-like wings. The figure swung a scythe that was similar to Naruto's and smashed the beast into the ground. "Damn you, Death!" the beast yelled out as the figure slowly descended and landed next to the beast's head. "Quiet, Kurama, you are scaring our guest," the person known as Death said, making Naruto go pale. Death? As in the Shinigami?" Naruto asked before he gulped and assumed a fighting position. "I don't care who you are. I am not going to die yet, I haven't fulfilled my wish yet," Naruto yelled, glaring into Death's mask. Death laughed as he walked up and placed a hand on Naruto's head, shocking the young blonde. "Calm down, young one, I am not the one that you refer you as the Shinigami," Death clarified as Naruto sighed and relaxed. That is until Death picked him up by his collar and glared at him. "I am something much, much worse," he said, making Naruto go pale again. Worse than the Shinigami? Then there is only one thing I can do now, Naruto thought before he grabbed Death's hand. "Take this, Dabbao," Naruto shouted as he kicked Death directly between the legs. Death released Naruto and fell to the ground and writhed in agony as Naruto ran up and grabbed Death's dropped scythe. Death inwardly smirked at his acting as Naruto grabbed the scythe. Kyuubi watched with interest as Naruto's eyes and mouth opened up wide as purple light started to glow out of him as he levitated into the air. He flew up to about the center of the room before he was enveloped in purple light and was encased in a cocoon. Naruto watched as Death stood in front of three faces carved into rock that started talking to him. He saw a man chained to the ground with a large sword in the ground beside him. He saw how Death vowed to free his brother by proving his innocence. He saw that Death rode a horse with green flames for a mane and a green crow guiding his way. He saw how Death fought many enemies and overcame multiple obstacles. Naruto was fascinated with the different bosses he faced. Naruto really thought it cool how he killed a giant robot. A giant effing robot. Anyway, Naruto saw how Death fought his sins by killing the avatar of chaos and then sacrificed himself to resurrect mankind. Naruto then only saw that Death's spirit was flown to Naruto's body when the Kyuubi was sealed and saw how he was sealed in as well. Death waited with Kurama in suspense as the saw two large blue disembodied arms ripped the cocoon apart and carried Naruto to the ground. They watched as Naruto raised one finger. "I just have one question," Naruto said, getting Death to nod. "You really like green, huh?" Naruto asked as Death and Kurama face planted to the ground. "That is unnecessary information," Death said as Naruto smiled then frowned. "How did you get pulled into the seal like this guy?" Naruto said, pointing to the giant fox to his right. "I can answer that, brat. When he was sacrificed, his soul was going to the Council for Resurrection when I was being sealed. When your father summoned the Shinigami, it attracted Death from his universe into ours. When I was sealed, the seal was to seal all of the chakra around the area, hence why Death was sucked inside," Kurama explained while Naruto nodded. "Everything Kurama speaks of is true to my knowledge. What shall you do now?" Death asked. They both waited for his answer. "It should be obvious," Naruto said as Death waited for him to explain but was shocked as Naruto bowed to both Death and Kurama. "Death-san, Kurama-san, would you please teach me to become a great ninja so I can use that power to protect those closest to me?" Naruto asked as he could still feel the happiness that Death felt when he freed his brother. "Naruto Uzumaki, it would be fitting if I were to make sure that the next horseman was up to par," Death said with a smile behind his mask. Naruto smiled at him and finally noticed what the horseman was wearing, or rather lack of. He could see the skull mask that hid his face and black hair that draped down around it. He showed an unhealthy amount of muscle that only muscle-loving fanatics could pull off. "Somewhere to Kumogakure," the Raikage sneezed, dropping a dumbbell that almost broke through the heavily reinforced floor. "I feel like someone is finding the joys of working out," the Raikage said before he felt motivated to lift a heavier dumbbell, flexing his muscles at the same time. With Naruto shivered for a second before he went back to his observation. He saw thick gauntlets on his wrist that looked like they were made of the same metal that the scythe was made of. He looked further down and wished he didn't. He saw that Death was covered with only a loincloth on his lower area, and in Naruto's opinion he was showing way too much leg. He also saw thick leather boots with straps for holding the scythe when separated. Naruto then turned his attention to the giant fox when he started talking. I'm only going to train you since there is nothing better to do and I don't want my container to look weak. Kurama said before he realized something. Hey brat, where do you get the idea you call me my real name? Naruto smiled as he looked the fox in the eyes. It's either Kurama or Furball. Naruto said as Kurama rolled his eyes and laid back down. Get ready Naruto, for we will not be going easy on you. Death stated as he felt Naruto leaving his mindscape. I had to get him ready before they come to get him. I can only hope he is fine when she gets a hold of him, Death thought as he started thinking what he could teach Naruto while he still had time. So Naruto, are you ready to go back to the village? Jiraiya asked Naruto, who jumped down from the tree he had been climbing. Why do we have to go back there? Naruto asked Jiraiya as he still held bad memories of that place. I want you to attend the academy, and besides, don't you have someone to visit? Jiraiya asked with a perverted smile, causing Naruto to blush and hurriedly pack his stuff. What are we waiting for? Naruto asked before he pulled Jiraiya down the road. Sometime later, 3 figures were seen walking towards the gates of Konoha as Kotetsu and Izumo got ready to welcome the figures before they widened their eyes at the sight. They stood in awe as the figures gave the identification to enter and just walked into the village. After their brains processed what they saw, Kotetsu smirked at Izumo, who was crying, holding out his wallet. Told you he would come back, Izumo. Kotetsu laughed as he took all the money out of Izumo's wallet. That's not even possible. How did you know he would come back? Izumo asked as he put his now empty wallet back. Easy, I just do as I always do with that guy. Kotetsu said, pausing for effect. Bet the opposite of what a normal person would do. He explained as Izumo face palmed. Well, at least it's clear that things are going to get a lot louder now. Izumo said while Kotetsu nodded and settled down in his chair for a nap. With the 3 figures, all 3 figures wore cloaks that covered most of their face and bodies. The tallest person had white hair with yellow and black streaks showing from under his hood and stood at a height of 6 feet 2. Next to him stood a childlike figure with what appeared to be a mask under his hood. He stood at a height of 4 feet and was holding the hand of the girl next to him. She had green hair falling out of her hood and stood at a height of 4 feet 10. So Gaki, where do you want to go first? The tallest figure asked. The smallest one, who released the hand of the girl, took a thinking pose. The girl sighed and shook her head, watching the young man repeat his habit. How about you go see the old man and take her with you? The smallest figure said, getting a nod from the tall man. The girl nodded. What are you going to do, Gaki? The man asked as he could feel a headache coming on as the younger man smiled behind his mask. I am going to meet some old friends, he said as he disappeared in a swirl of flames. The 2 taller figures shook their heads and then took off to the tower where the Hokage was. With Tenten a few minutes ago. Tenten sighed as she stood behind the counter and waited for a customer to walk in. She stood up as the door opened and revealed 2 girls, one with blonde hair and another with pink hair. Welcome to Sword Sheath, how may I help you? Tenten asked the 2, and the blonde shook her head while the pink head opened to her mouth to talk. What kind of weapon do you think Sasuke-kun would like? She asked with stars in her eyes. Tenten sighed and forced a smile and was about to answer when a flame swirl appeared in front of her and a boy emerged. While she stood in shock, the boy picked her up and smiled under his mask. A forced smile doesn't fit that pretty face, he said while Sakura was the first to regain sense and screamed. A chain dashed out from the back and wrapped around the boy while the owner took his daughter into his hands. They all looked back at the masked boy who had blocked the chain with a scythe. Scythe? Tenten thought before she gasped and jumped at the boy and ripped his mask off. Tenten, get away from that guy. He could be dangerous, Ino shouted as Sakura fainted behind her. Tenten's dad sighed, collected his chain, then went back into the forge. Ino looked back to Tenten, who was currently snuggling into the blonde boy's chest. Ino looked at the whisker marks and wondered where she had seen those before. While he is distracted with Tenten sacrificing herself to protect us, I'll take Sakura and get out of here. Ino thought, giving her friend a silent prayer for helping the escape. Naruto watched them leave and made a shadow clone to switch the sign to closed. Tenten, however, was hugging the item she had dreamed about for 6 years. Naruto-kun, she shouted, looking into his purple face. ARP please, Naruto asked, suffering from air loss. Tenten released him and jumped onto his back. Sorry Naruto-kun, but anyway, what did you get me from your trip? Tenten asked excitedly while Naruto raised an eyebrow. How do you know I got you anything? Naruto asked while Tenten smiled and placed her face next to his. Because if you have a crush on me and you might get a reward. Tenten finished with a wink, causing Naruto to blush at the slightly older girl and hand her a scroll. Tenten frowned when she got it. Naruto-kun, I can't believe you got me some sword and a scroll, she said, pouting. Naruto sat on the counter and opened a book. Open it and see, silly girl, he said as she did just that and poofed out a small red staff with orange tips. What does this do? She asked as she swung it and destroyed 2 weapon racks when the staff extended as she got stars in her eyes again. She jumped at Naruto and tackled him and laid kisses all over his face. Naruto blushed and held out a book when she finished his gift. I found this book and staff together. It said it used to belong to a Son Gaku, or something like that. She took the book and started reading it while Naruto took this as a chance to escape. He left a sack on the counter for Tenten's dad to find later and left to meet the next person. With Hinata. Hinata sighed as she sat under a tree wondering why everyone avoided her. She was so absorbed in her thought she never noticed that someone laid their head in her lap. She noticed that her lap felt heavier and looked down. When she saw the mask she jumped up and ran behind the tree. Naruto was suddenly woken from his nap when his head met the ground. So I see it's too early for a lap pillow, he said with a sigh when Hinata poked her head put from the tree and watched him. What do you want? Hinata asked as Naruto decided that if they became friends he would get rid of that stutter. Well, I was hoping to take a nap on a cute girl's lap, but I see that won't happen, he said, getting up before Hinata jumped at him. Why, you think I'm cute? She said in shock, making Naruto slowly back away from Hinata, who was beet red from her outburst. She noticed that the boy who called her cute was wearing a mask. She was determined to see the face behind it. See, can you remove your mask please? Hinata asked the boy who had backed up quite a distance. Only if you promise not to yell anymore, Naruto told her, to which she nodded rapidly too. He slowly pulled off his mask and revealed his blue eyes and whiskered face. Hinata blushed at the cute boy and thought back to when she had seen a face like that. Her face went even redder as she remembered that this boy was the one that saved her 6 years ago. Eep! Hinata shouted before she fainted at the tree. Naruto sighed and placed his mask back on. And here I thought she would not scream again, he said, and made a clone to watch over Hinata before running over to the Hokage tower before eyeing the Hokage faces and getting a sinister grin. At the Hokage tower, the Hokage looked at the 2 individuals in front of his desk and eyed them carefully. He knew one was his student Jiraiya, but he changed since he had last seen them. His hair was now white with dark yellow streaks running through it. His red markings were now black and he had black rings around his eyes. He then turned his attention to the girl who he had never met. She seemed to be shorter than Jiraiya and had waist-length green hair that seemed to move like flames when it caught the light just right. He saw that she had green eyes that matched her hair's energy. She looked like she might be a princess from some faraway land. He had to suppress a nosebleed when he saw her bountiful S that seemed to be C-cup at least. She seemed to be in her early teens at least. Hello Jiraiya, who is your guest? Hiruzen the Hokage asked, gesturing towards the girl. Jiraiya sighed as he saw the girl was going to do nothing to explain herself. Her name is Midori, and she is under protection of Naruto's clan. Jiraiya explained as Hiruzen started sweating. What do you mean? The Uzumaki clan is not in Konoha anymore, he said as he tried to pull the conversation away from what he believed the conversation was going. Jiraiya laughed out loud. Don't even try it, old man, Jiraiya said, laughing. Naruto knows and he is pissed at you, Jiraiya said before he was slapped on the back of his head by the young girl. Alright already, I got it. Look out the window, geezer, Jiraiya said, pouting about his fun getting ruined, while Hiruzen looked at the window and almost had a heart attack. The first 2 Hokages had looks of shock looking at the village. The third face had a look of shame and look away from the fourth face that was glaring at him and the village. Above all of the head stood writing in paint that stated, Naruto shi Namikaze is back. Datbeo, with a skull painted above it. Hiruzen paled and slowly turned toward Jiraiya and his jaw dropped when he saw a masked figure standing on his desk. He stumbled out of his chair and backed into the wall. Who are you? The figure laughed and shook his fingers slowly before hopping off the desk and walking towards the old man who looked to be on the verge of a heart attack. The figure raised his hand when a girl slapped the figure on the back of the head. "Cut it out, Baka master," she said, placing her hands on her hips and pouting cutely. The figure lost his mask in the slap and rubbed his head sheepishly. Hiruzen gasped when he saw whisker marks and bright blue eyes. "Did you really have to hit me that hard, Fidget?" Naruto said to the girl that Hiruzen noticed after getting over his shock. He stared in confusion of what she was wearing since it wasn't what most people wore around his village. A knee-high dark green kimono that seemed like it was made for battle concealed her B-cup-s. She wore strange gauntlets that he suspected hid some kind of weapon, though the strangest thing to him was that the girl was barefooted of all things. The girl named Fidget stuck out her tongue before jumping on Jiraiya's shoulder, who didn't seem fazed by it. "How long are you going to do this, Fidget?" Jiraiya asked as his shoulder started hurt from the impact. "Trust me, Arrow Oji, it's not like I want to sit on your shoulder. I am just waiting for Master to get older so he can hold me," Fidget said, blushing, imaging Naruto in a couple years. Jiraiya saw this and smiled lecherously. "So does our little Crow-chan like a certain fox?" he said, sticking out his pinky, making Naruto and Fidget blush before Fidget turned to Naruto angrily. Don't get the wrong idea. It's not like I'll like you or anything," she said while Naruto sulked in a corner. Naruto drew circles in the corner while a tiny rain cloud appeared over his head. Jiraiya laughed while Fidget was having an internal battle whether to help Naruto or not. Hiruzen had enough of this comedy skit and released a little key, when an overwhelming presence filled the room. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked to the one person they had been ignoring. Midori noticed she had everyone's presence and pulled out a pad and pencil. She wrote on the pad at an outstanding speed, and when she finished she held up the pad for everyone to see. "Don't forget where you are, Master. Ignore that pesky crow and proceed with your business. I would like to depart soon." Naruto nodded and switched back to his serious mode while Fidget was shouting something about dumb horses and writing. "All right, old man, let's cut the crap," Naruto said when he saw Hiruzen about to hug him and ask where he had been. Hiruzen looked in shock as Naruto placed his mask back on and pulled out a list. "I have something that might interest both of us. I will become a ninja and start the academy tomorrow. I will become heir to the Namikaze and you will make it an announcement to the village. I will also gain complete access to the Namikaze fortune and land as heir," Naruto said as he appeared to be reading off the list. "And if I refuse these terms, Naruto?" Hiruzen asked, wondering if he could pull the boy back into a normal life. "I will leave the village and see what village would want the Yondaime's son and Kyuubi's vessel," Naruto countered instantly, then adopted a thinking pose. "I think Kumo would like that offer," he said when Hiruzen sighed in defeat. "I will accept those terms with the condition that you cannot access the Namikaze account until you are a genin at least," he said with no room for argument. Naruto nodded, then leapt back to Fidget and Midori and touched both their arms. "See ya, old man," Naruto yelled, disappearing in a puff of smoke with Fidget leaving behind crow feathers and Midori left a swirl of green flames, leaving only Jiraiya behind. Jiraiya sighed at the three of them and looked at Hiruzen with a serious look. "I am going to be leaving the village," Jiraiya said, getting a look of shock from his teacher. "Didn't you just get back with Naruto?" Hiruzen asked, since Naruto left the village, left the Jiraiya in the first place. "I know I did, but Naruto can protect himself from the villagers now. He is about Hyde Chunin if I were to grade him," he said, getting a look of disbelief from Hiruzen. "I don't care if you believe me or not, but I want him to attend the academy because he need to learn to trust people more than he does now." "I understand that, but why are you going to leave him alone again?" Hiruzen asked as Jiraiya lifted up his shirt and unveiled a yellowish eyeball on his chest with a black outline. Hiruzen jumped back and tried to hold down his lunch and won, barely. "I tried to seal out on myself and it backfired. All I can hear is a voice telling me to hurt others, especially Naruto. It tells me that he had a power that is going to swell immensely soon in the future. I can only hope that he doesn't unlock both of his parents' bloodlines since he already has Kushina's special chakra." "He what?" Hiruzen shouted as Jiraiya smiled and faded out of existence, whispering these words before he vanished. "Should Naruto die before I get him, I will make you beg for me to kill you, old man." Hiruzen sank into his chair and reached for his favorite book, but stopped when he remembered the man who wrote it was the same who just threatened him. Hiruzen decided that it was a good time to fight his now second most feared enemy, paperwork. At the Namikaze estate, Naruto stood in front of his new home surrounded by boxes with his two friends on both sides of him. Fidget dropped her jaw as Midori looked at all the boxes impressed. How did you move all their boxes so fast, Baka Master? Fidget asked Naruto, who glared at her. Fidget, I told you the only time you can say that is when you wear a maid's uniform. Naruto said in a neutral tone while Fidget pouted cutely. Anyway, to answer your question, I moved all of it with my clones. Midori pulled out her notepad and started writing again. Master, you said your clones can touch anything and you get the memories back, right? She asked and Naruto nodded. Midori had a far-off look on her face and a small smile. Fidget waved her hand in front of Midori's face as she got a slight nosebleed. Fidget and Naruto shrugged their shoulders and started moving the things inside. Fidget leaned over and whispered to Naruto. Master, you stole these things, didn't you? Naruto smiled and nodded. I also stole a bunch of stuff from the sealing department, so I have a bunch of electronic stuff they were going to throw out since they couldn't figure out how to use it. But you know how to write? Fidget asked excitedly since she loved playing with new things. Naruto scoffed and waved her off. Of course I do, I'm a genius. Naruto said while his two inhabitants' sweat dropped. You guys know how to work that stuff, right? Naruto thought hopefully. Kit, I know how to make a power source using your powers since you wanted to grab every shiny thing there was. Kurama said inside Naruto's mind. I am sure I know where to plug the devices in since we had similar things in the four council's chambers. Death said, his voice full of confidence. Alright, thanks guys. I owe you one. Naruto said before he got a chill down his spine. Well kid, if you are giving out favors I have two then. He said as he heard Naruto sigh at the fox. First off, I want you to fancy this place up. I'm tired of living in a sewer for Kami's sake. Naruto agreed silently and concentrated while his mindscape warped and changed. It changed to a fiery plain with geysers scattered everywhere. What got Kurama was that all the inhabitants were only scantily clad women. Kurama picked his head up with steam coming out of his ears and his eyes popping out of his head. Kurama regained himself before he started panting about his soon-to-be escapades. One more thing, we are going to start training soon and I want you to find a private place to train. Now then, come to Papa you little slew. Kurama started before Naruto made a bubble to encompass Kurama's entire new domain. Naruto may be a pervert but by no means was he at a level of hearing a fox go at it. Thank you young one, now like my flea-ridden roommate I also have two conditions for sharing my knowledge. Naruto nodded and waited for him to continue. First off, I want you to use a little of my energy and make a skull-shaped mark as high as you can. Death waited until Naruto had completed the skull, then pulsed the skull with his energy 3 times. The next task is fairly simple. I want you to start working on your capacity of my energy. If you increase it more you can use more of my moves from my past, and if all goes well then you shall gain some of my most useful abilities. Naruto dropped the box he was holding and started jumping up and down. New abilities? What is it? Death shook his head as he remembered that he was dealing with a child. Patience is a virtue, young one. Do I need to remind you of it again? Death asked as Naruto paled and shook his head. Death, can I call you Shin? Naruto asked after a long period of silence. What brought this up, young one? Death asked as he started walking toward a house that warped into existence next to him. Well, calling you Death is a little depressing, so I was wondering if I could call you that. Naruto explained, hoping that he would not anger his most powerful guest. Death thought about it before he nodded. I have found no reason why that would not be suitable. The now named Shi said as he opened the door only to drop to his knees at what he saw inside. How is that possible? Young one, did you do this? Shi shouted, making Naruto cringe at the loud noise. I thought you might like it. Do you not like it? Naruto asked timidly, wondering if he made a mistake. How did you do this? Shi asked as Naruto explained how he saw it from his memories when he picked up the staff. Thank you, young one. I shall repay this debt whatever way I can for the peace you have offered me. Death said calmly with a smile as he walked through the door towards the village he and his 3 brethren slaughtered before. Death smiled as he was met with a hug from his wife and child. Naruto smiled as he felt the raging torrent inside of Shi calm down immensely. He was about to shed a tear at the heart-jerking moment when he was punched in the face by Fidget. What the hell, Fidget? Naruto shouted as he picked himself up and held his swollen cheek. Baka master. Fidget shouted, red in the face. Don't ignore me when I call you. I was asking you where you wanted to sleep, Fidget said as she picked up her box again. Naruto looked around and saw most of the stuff unpacked and the boxes moved inside. Midori was lying on a couch reading a manga where the main character carried around a baby on his back. Naruto saw how the character punched people into walls and decided to remember that in case he needed it tomorrow. I'll take the master bedroom, of course, Fidget. What did you want to sleep with me? Naruto asked teasingly. Fidget blushed and stormed upstairs to a room so she could sleep while Midori perked her head up. What about you, Midori? Naruto asked before he was pulled by Midori up to the bedroom. Naruto soon ended up laying on his two favorite pillows as Midori stroked the blonde mop in her chest as the both went to sleep. With Tenten, I wonder if Naruto-kun will be entering the academy with me tomorrow. Tenten wondered aloud as she brushed her hair straight before she went to bed. I can't wait. First he is going to try to sit next to me, then he is going to fight some bully for my love, then we are going to date. Kya, Tenten said before she squealed like a fangirl. She soon stopped herself, then went to bed cuddling her fox plushie. With Hinata, I wonder if I am going to see Naruto-kun again. Hinata thought as she also got ready to sleep, unaware that she and Tenten were sharing the same thoughts like some other girls that saw Naruto that day. The next day, Naruto woke up and stretched his arms and tried to roll over, but found that his blanket was heavier than usual. Why the heck is the blanket so heavy? Naruto thought as he tried to throw it off. Why didn't the blanket move? And when did it grow arms and legs? And since when do blankets breathe? He thought before opening his eyes and saw Fidget hugging him from the left side and Midori holding onto the right side. Naruto sighed happily and was about to go back to sleep when he saw he had 30 minutes to get to the academy. Naruto stared at the clock, then looked to his two companions. He took a deep breath and screamed into both of their ears. Midori and Fidget shot up and aimed for Naruto's stomach but aimed lower than expected. The Hokage suddenly felt like he would have to be filing noise complaints about a little girl screaming in the morning. Naruto was soon dressed and standing at the door glaring at both girls who were looking at the ground in shame. I'll be back later, keep the house safe till then, Naruto said in a high-pitched voice, making the two girls suppress their giggles. Naruto then smirked and laughed. You two are so getting pranked later, he said before he disappeared in a purple haze. The two girls went deathly white and went to write their wills in case Naruto got a little extreme in his pranks. In front of the academy, Iruka walked into the door and got ready to check roll when Sasuke Uchiha walked through the door wearing his ever-present glare. Almost all the girls in the class squealed at his appearance while two seemed depressed. Iruka activated his big head jutsu to quiet the class down. Alright, so let's see here. Shino Aburame, one list of names later, Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki? Iruka asked when the class gasped, making him look up. He also gasped when he saw a purple haze fill the room. In the haze a shadow appeared and raised one hand. The figure swiped his hand down and as suddenly as the haze came it left. The class took in the newcomer's appearance and judged him to see what he would be. He wore a black hoodie that held his scythe in dual form, over a dark green shirt which had a skull on it. He wore black pants that seemed to be made of scales when the light caught. He wore black boots with a steel toe guard on it. The fact which caught most of the class's attention was the mask that concealed all of his face below his eyes, which were also covered by yellow shades. I'm here, sensei, but you are pronouncing the name wrong, the figure said when he turned to the teacher behind him. Oh, my mistake. How do you say it? Iruka said as he got ready to write it down. It's Naruto Namikaze, Naruto said as if it was the simplest thing in the world, then walked over to Tenten and wrapped an arm around her, making said girl rival one of Hinata's blushes. Tenten was so happy she didn't notice the glares from the girls in class. Alright, Iruka said, writing it down on the class roll. Naruto Namik KKKKKs, Iruka exclaimed, shouting the desk. The class wondered what was wrong until a pink-haired girl stood up and pointed at Naruto. Sensei, this baka is a liar, she shouted, getting most people to cover their ears. The Yondaime never had a child, she said, smirking that she had embarrassed the person who had outdid her, Sasuke-kun. Naruto sighed and took off his glasses, then held up a picture of the Yondaime. Only the Yondaime had this blonde hair in this village. The Yamanaka clan may have blonde hair but not this kind of blonde. Though I wouldn't mind having such a cute girl as my sister," he said, giving a foxy smile to Ino, who blushed then fainted. "He is right, Miss Haruno," the Sandame said as he walked through the door. Iruka and the rest of the class gave him a bow when he entered, then went back to focusing on Naruto. "Then why wasn't he in the village all this time?" Sasuke asked, wondering why the Hokage would come for just one kid if it wasn't him in question. "That is for certain reasons only known to a certain number of people. He is without a doubt the son of the late Yondaime," he said as the class stared at Naruto, who seemed to have gone to sleep. The Hokage gave the class an introduction speech, then left to give other classes that were going to become students. After the visit from the Hokage, Iruka brought the class outside to determine their current skills as a shinobi. He had the entire class do their strongest jutsu that was combat-oriented. Naruto decided to see what his classmates had in them. Shino Aburame made a tornado of chakra eating bugs which would have killed a normal human. Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akamichi did a collaboration jutsu in which Choji expanded to a giant human boulder using his clan's jutsu. Shikamaru used his clan's jutsus to control Choji and flattened the dummy multiple times. The remainder used a basic fireball jutsu until it was Sasuke's turn. Sasuke walked to the front and smirked. He made the hand seals for the fireball jutsu and spit one out that was 3 times as large as the others. Kya! All of Sasuke's fangirls, and boys, squealed as he shot a superior look at Naruto, who rolled his eyes behind his shades. Tenten squeezed his arm in worry and Hinata also shot him a look of worry. Naruto patted her arm and nodded at Hinata, who still was too shy to stand by her crush. Naruto strolled to the back of the crowd and picked up a pebble. "Baka, you need to try to hit the target, not collect rocks." Sakura, who smiled at her ability to insult Naruto, which was made even sweeter when Sasuke smirked at her joke. Naruto, however, just flicked the rock which hovered slowly over to the target. Naruto just smirked and held up a hand sign, making the small rock explode onto the dummy. The class stood in shock of the exploding as Naruto strolled back to Tenten. How did you make that rock explode like that?" Hinata asked as she finally got the courage to stand next to Naruto. Naruto smirked and wrapped his arms around Hinata and Tenten. "A ninja never reveals his secrets," Naruto said before he leaned in and whispered to Hinata. "But I am sure I can be convinced," Naruto said as he blew into her ear, making her blush as red as a rose before fainting. Tenten glared at Naruto before she turned away pouting. Naruto smiled and nibbled on her ear, making her blush, and turned to Naruto, who smiled. Tenten was calmed by that smile like she usually was and leaned into Naruto's shoulder until the next test. Unknown to everyone else, Midori and Fidget stood on a tree. "That baka, why would he use the smallest rock?" Fidget whispered, fuming. Midori just nodded and patted her younger sister's shoulder. Fidget smiled at her sister and got ready for the next test. "All right, class, the next test will be a throwing test. There will be 5 dummies set up at different lengths, and you will use 10 kunai and 10 shurikens to score according to where you hit them and how far," Iruka said as the class got an order to take the test. Everyone scored an average of 5 hits with both weapon on the second dummy. Tenten got 7 hits with the kunai on the 4th dummy and 5 shurikens on the last. Sasuke walked up to the line and threw all his shurikens at once, and they embedded themselves into the chest of the 4th dummy. The kunai he threw hit with 9 in fatal spots and 1 in a non-fatal spot on the same dummy. Like an alarm clock, Sasuke's fangirls squealed the second he walked off. Naruto stayed where he was and threw the items randomly into the air. An unseen string wrapped around said items, guiding them to the last dummy. The kunai made a big circle in the 5th dummy's chest, and the shurikens finished the design for Konoha's sign. Everyone clapped at the performance while Sasuke seethed, while Sakura pulled Ino, who was clapping, over to Sasuke to try and cheer him up. "All right, class, for the last test today, we are going to try taijutsu. You can either fight against a classmate or against me," Iruka said as he saw determination fire up in the kids' eyes. Most of the clan kids decided to fight against Iruka, while the nameless family kids fought against each other. When it came to Sasuke's turn, he challenged Naruto, who was tickling Hinata and Tenten. Sasuke Uchiha vs Naruto Namikaze. Begin, Iruka said as he backed out of the arena. What's wrong, Dobi? Scared to fight against an elite? Sasuke said as Naruto just stood motionless. Naruto grabbed his scythe handles and threw them into the tree above Tenten and Hinata. Hold those till I get back, okay? This won't take long, Naruto said, giving them a wink, getting the two to blush while a number of girls glared at them. Naruto turned back to Sasuke and raised one finger in his direction. Sasuke fumed at the rude gesture that Naruto made and charged at him. Naruto waited till he got close, then kicked in Sasuke's direction. Sasuke smirked at the slow kick and jumped over it before he was shocked when Naruto also jumped into the air smirking. Naruto let loose a vicious roundhouse kick which Sasuke tried to block but was still sent flying into a tree in the opposite direction of where Naruto's two friends were. The class paled when they saw the Uchiha's head stuck into the tree. Naruto sheepishly rubbed the back of his head, then ran to Sasuke. Hey Sasuke, if you don't wake up your fanboys will think that you are inviting them in, Naruto said, making Sasuke jerk his head out of the tree and glare at Naruto before storming inside. Everyone just stared at the scene before following the emo king inside. Naruto smiled and patted his clothes off and gave a thumbs up to a tree before freezing up and looking into the sky. What the hell was that? Naruto said as he focused on one spot in the sky. He didn't notice when Tenten and Hinata walked up to him and held out his weapons. Naruto-kun? They both called out to him, concerned. Naruto shook of the feeling and smiled at his two friends, making them feel relieved. Thanks for the weapons, girls, let's go inside, Naruto said before they saw Sasuke walk outside in front of a mob of older kids. Girls, back up a bit, Naruto said as he walked up to the mob leader. Give me those weapons, dope. They should be helping out an elite instead of a nobody like you, Sasuke said, smirking. Naruto shook his head and looked to the mob. What is he giving you guys? Naruto asked, counting how many guys there were. 10,000 yen each when we get the weapon from you, a kid said from in the crowd. Naruto nodded, then combined the dual wield into the original form. Take it then, Sasuke, Naruto said as he planted the scythe in the ground. Sasuke reached for the scythe and grabbed it when a purple haze emerged and formed a snake which bit his arm. What the hell was that? Sasuke yelled as he jerked his hand back. Well, you see, that weapon is kind of strange. It picks its master and those who can wield it. It usually picks those with great potential, and it didn't pick you, so it seems you are going to suck forever. Sorry man, Naruto sucked his teeth and patted Sasuke's shoulder, feigning disappointment. Sasuke jumped back and sent his minions to attack when he saw they were cowering in fear of the weapon's snake, which flung the weapon at Naruto, who grabbed it midair and swung it onto his back. Well, I have wasted enough time, see y'all losers and ladies, Naruto said before he left in a poof of smoke, making all in the area stare at the cloud in shock. Tenten and Hinata turned and glared at each other. A 13-year-old blonde boy smiled and jumped out of bed and looked at his calendar. Woohoo! Midori, Fidget, wake up, today's the day, Naruto shouted as he bounced on the bed, waking the two up. Midori rubbed her eyes and hugged a pillow while Fidget threw a pillow at the alarm clock that woke them up. Today is what day? Is it the day we have to go back? She asked as she wondered what trouble she could cause today. Naruto caught the pillow and stared at them in a clueless expression. Midori and Fidget sweat dropped when they saw his face. You forgot, didn't you? Fidget said angrily as she cracked her knuckles. Naruto shook his head quickly and chuckled. Oh, of course I didn't. Anyway, you guys can go off for today anyway, since I have to attend the graduation ceremony at school, Naruto said as he stepped outside for the two to get ready and meet him in the yard. Are you two ready? Naruto asked as Fidget and Midori nodded. Naruto closed his eyes and focused as purple energy started to swirl around him. Naruto's bangs darkened at the tips and grew slightly. His whisker marks darkened and stretched till they made 3 lines across his face. He opened his eyes to show they were now green. I shall now begin the transformation, Naruto said in a voice deeper than his usual one. The two girls blushed, then nodded. Naruto walked up to Fidget and placed his forehead on hers. Come forth in your animal form, Dust, your master death beckons, he said as some energy flowed around Fidget, making a cocoon around her form. The cocoon hardened, then shrunk down to a smaller size before breaking and releasing a black crow that landed on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto walked over to Midori, who smiled at her master. Naruto nodded and placed his forehead on hers. "Come forth in your animal form to spare, your master death beckons," Naruto said as the energy repeated the process, only expanding to release a white horse with a green flame for a mane. "Present yourselves to me when you are certain that you are ready to turn back. Now be gone," Naruto said as purple energy pulled the horse and crow into the ground. Naruto took a deep breath and the energy that swirled around him retreated back inside. "How is it that time, Shin? It's getting better, young one. Soon you will be able to call upon dust and despair without the words. Still, as far as you got with Kurama's chakra, it is a shame you are only to pull a drop of my power at a time," Shin said as he sat on a bench watching the animals fly by in Naruto's mindscape. "Kit, you need to be able to take on more of my power if you wish to take Shin's chakra as well. To be honest, I didn't expect you to get up to 3 tails in only 4 years," Kurama said as he sat on a throne on the opposite side of the mindscape watching his demon concubines burn the souls of the villagers who tormented Naruto as a child. "Yeah, I know, it's just upsetting that I can't get over the barrier for the 4th tail," Naruto thought to his 2 guests as he went to get changed for the exam. "Patience, young one, all best things in life are acquired with it," Death pointed out with Kurama agreeing with him. "Yeah, I know, it's just that I have a feeling that I am being targeted," Naruto said, making Kurama laugh. "Getting a bit full of yourself, Kit? Not everyone is out to get you," Kurama said, getting Naruto to shake his head at that thought. Somewhere in Amikagure, a man wearing a black robe with red clouds sneezed. "Hey, I just had an idea," Naruto said as he was halfway to the academy. "What if I could use both of your powers at the same time?" Naruto asked the 2. "I think that it might be possible, but not right now. You can't even use much of Shin's power. Besides, you would need near-perfect chakra control to use them together," Kurama said, making Naruto slam his hand into his palm. "I knew I forgot something," he said as he held up a cross-hand sign. "Taju Kage Bushin no Jutsu," he shouted as 300 Narutos popped into existence. "All right guys, you know what to do. Separate into 6 equal groups and the first group will go work on Fuinjutsu," he commanded as they saluted and hopped off to the Forest of Death. "Second group, you are in charge of elemental chakra training." The second group smiled at the easiest group, gave a thumbs up and then followed the first group. Third group, go wreak some havoc on the insects with Kurama's chakra for training, especially those bees. The third got feral smiles and hopped off to hurry and start the job. Fourth group, he started till he saw them glaring at him. "You have to go do it, so start working on Shin's chakra and Kenjutsu as well," he said with a pitying look while they flipped him off, then went after the other groups. Fifth group, go practice some of Dad's ninjutsu. The fifth group nodded, then jumped off. And lastly, sixth group, start working on reading the entire library. The last group sighed, then jumped off to the library. "Got all of your bases covered, Kit?" Kurama asked as Naruto started walking down the street again. Naruto nodded before he felt Shin sitting in a corner drawing circles in the grass. "My energy can't be that bad, is it?" he asked as Naruto's sweat dropped. "Don't forget what happened last time we did that." Flashback. Naruto sat in the Forest of Death surrounded by an army of 10,000 clones. Naruto smirked since this was the first time he was going to use Shin's energy. Naruto focused and was wrapped in a cocoon of purple energy. The clones looked at the cocoon, which quickly turned green and exploded. The clones watched as the original was now shirtless with torn-up pants. His hair was completely black as well as his eyes. Naruto stood up and looked at the army clones. He blurred out of sight, making the clones tense, and suddenly half of the field exploded in smoke, making the rest of the clones jump off. "What jutsu was that, and do we even know it?" a clone shouted to another who paled. "That wasn't a jutsu, I don't even think he used chakra," he said before he paled. "What, that's impossible, he had to have used Ga," he shouted as the original punched him through the stomach. The clone jumped out the middle and pulled out his scythe. He called the rest of the clones out. 1,000 clones used Kurama's chakra to pull out one-tailed cloak, while the other 2,000 either pulled out their scythes or readied jutsus. The clone panicked and tried to call to Shin. "Shin, what's going on? He can't hear you, Kit," Kurama shouted as he shouted while trying to keep a barrier up to keep out Shin in his Reaper form and his crazed villagers from his village. The clone looked out at the field to see Naruto walking through the army massacring them. The clone realized he was the last one as Naruto walked up to the clone's face. The clone thought of Tenten, Hinata, Fidget, Midori and Ino, then smiled as the original shoved a hand into the clone's chest. Naruto received all the clone's thoughts and pain as he let loose a soul-wrenching scream, scaring off all the animals there as he lost consciousness. End flashback. I did that? I have no memories of that time. Shin asked as he was mortified at what happened when he went berserk. Yeah, I almost had to biju them your ass to keep you out. Kyuubi said, laughing at his companion's expense. It's fine, Shin, Naruto said, trying to reassure him. That was 3 years ago, I can handle it better, he said, determined as he arrived at class and sat between Tenten and Hinata. Where were Fidget and Midori at that time? He asked, since the two had been rather quiet the past 4 years. They were in their animals' forms visiting their home, Naruto said as Kurama thought of something. Speaking of animal forms, Kit, Kurama started getting Naruto's attention. Since you are going to be through puberty, it has aligned itself with my heat period. Pretty soon you will feel some urges to mate with some able women. Naruto stared at the fox with a blank look on his face. Human terms, please? Naruto asked Shin while Kyuubi threatened to smash him. Soon you will want to reproduce with women that of our childbearing age, Shin said as Naruto sighed and turned back to Kurama. You will want to fuck hot women, Kurama said slowly. Thank you, was that so what? Naruto asked as he finally processed what was said. You mean I am going to do that to random women? Naruto yelled. No, only to women you feel a connection to, and if you don't, death or I might take control. Anyway, kid, you may want to calm down, he said to his host, who was no longer paying attention. At least it's only girls I like. So I can do this to Tenten-chan, that to Hinata-chan, and who knows, maybe Ino-chan may join in. Naruto said with a perverted giggle much like his teachers. Naruto, wake up. The entire class shouted at Naruto with blushes on their faces. Was I talking out loud? He asked as the class nodded. How much did you hear? Naruto asked with a blush on his face. What, you mean I am going to do that, and on? Said Shino, whose face was a light pick but still emotionless. Naruto paled and looked to the girls he was talking about to see them all fainted with perverted smiles and nosebleeds. Naruto, how does a 13-year-old know that much? Iruka said, ready to give Naruto detention and a stern lecture. Anyway class, today is the day of the exams. We will have you complete the 3 standard jutsu, then thrust you out into the world as shinobi, Iruka said with a smile on his face while Naruto raised his hand. What is it, Naruto? So we have to perform 3 jutsus and then we become shinobi? Naruto asked as Iruka nodded. That is so stupid, Naruto complained, sinking into his chair. Baka, that's the way it's always been. You need to complete the 3 academy jutsus to pass. The Kawarimi, the Bunshin and the Henge, Sakura said as she laughed at Naruto. So you think that those 3 jutsus that do nothing in terms of offensive damage are going to keep up safe out there? Naruto said as the kids looked at Iruka, who just nodded at the information. That is true, Naruto, but we have you do those jutsus to see if you have the chakra capacity to be taught real jutsus by your team sensei, Iruka said as Naruto just sighed then slid down further. Iruka turned around then let out a sigh of relief. No one has ever questioned that before, though what he said makes sense. Iruka thought, making a mental note to go talk to the council. The class went through the exams with some faring better than others. Naruto didn't concern himself as he sat in the back with Ino on the row in front turned around, Hinata to his left, and Tenten to his right. The 4 of them sat in the back of the class working on one drawing together. Sasuke came back from the testing and was trying to drown out the screeching of the pink recording next to him. He saw the group sitting in the back and smirked as he approached them. He snatched the paper up, expecting Naruto to get angry about it. Naruto, however, just stared him like he was stupid. Sasuke, if you wanted a piece of paper you could have asked, okay? Naruto said, slowly making Sasuke red with anger. Me Naruto, my friend, Naruto said, making big hand gestures which caused Sasuke's anger to boil over. Sasuke charged forward at Naruto, who simply held up a hand and caught it. Ladies, I will be right back, stay beautiful. Naruto said with a wink, making his 3 female friends blush and the rest of the girls glaring at them since they got a compliment from one of the school hotties. Naruto walked down the hall towards the exam room and recalled one of Shin's lessons when they first met. Flashback. 8-year-old Naruto sat in a tent meditating as he talked with his mentor. "So what is the lesson today, Death-san?" Naruto asked as he hung upside down from a tree watching Death push his little girl on a swing that in Naruto's opinion was probably sick since she was really red and kept looking everywhere. "Mizore, go inside to your mother," Death told his daughter, who glanced at Naruto before running inside redder than ever. "Young one, tell me one thing first. Where did you get everyone's personality? Did you make them up?" Death asked as one fact was nagging at the back of his mind. Naruto gave a puzzled look, then shook his head. "No, I got them from the shards in your chest, so it's all theirs," Naruto said before Death slumped his shoulders in defeat. "All right, I was just wondering. Now for today's lesson you will learn to fight," Death said as Naruto gave a groan. He dropped from the tree and dropped to his feet. "But I already know how to fight people," Naruto whined as he kicked the grass. "Not this kind of fighting, young one," Death said before he got a smirk. "Though I can see why a midget like you wouldn't want to fight. That blonde hair must make you stupid as you are short. Plus those whisker marks make you look stupid," Death said to Naruto, who glared at Death. "You can call me short, blonde, stupid, dense and fat," Naruto said as Death wondered when he called him dense and fat. "But no one makes fun of the whiskers," Naruto yelled as he charged at Death with a Rasengan in hand. Death waited till he was close enough, then moved aside and stuck his foot out, tripping Naruto, who just got a full serving of mind dirt. "That, young one, is called a psychological battle," Death said as he waited for Naruto to get back up. "A pys, pishko, pishokmanaskal?" Naruto tried to repeat the word when Death held up his hand to stop him. "A battle of words. You use your words to affect your opponent. You can either make them as docile as a kitten or violent as a rampaging bull," Death explained as Naruto processed the lesson. "But why would you want your opponent to be angry? If an opponent is angry enough, as you were earlier, then he will abandon his sense of self, making him easier to strike down," Death said as he grabbed Naruto's shoulder. "Now, let me teach you how to be a gentleman to women, and this is not a lesson you want to fail," Death said as Naruto got a shiver down his back from the tone of his voice. In the real world, Jiraiya was worried about Naruto, who screamed every 2 minutes. End flashback. Naruto shivered as he thought back to the punishment Death put him through when he got something wrong. He entered the exam room and stood in front of Iruka and 2 other instructors. "All right, Naruto, first we need you so make a bunchin," Iruka instructed as Naruto made the seals for his favorite jutsu. Next, Naruto appeared 4 shadow clones that then started stomping with the original. Naruto read. The original shouted, getting weird looks from the instructors as he transformed into an orange skin-tight jumpsuit. Naruto green. A clone shouted, wearing the same thing but in a different color. Naruto blue, said another on the opposite side. Naruto yellow, said the clone on the end, transforming into a woman. And Naruto pink, finished off the last clone, copying the yellow Naruto's action. And together we are the Konoha Hokage squad. The original shouted as they performed poses that made their shape look a leaf. If you tilted your head, turned off the lights and closed both eyes. Naruto, what the heck are you doing? Iruka said, trying to keep a grin off his face as the other 2 instructors were rolling on the floor laughing. Well, I thought you guys would be tired of doing the same thing all the time, so I spiced it up a little. Naruto explained with a swivel of his hips at the end. Well, it looks like you pass, one of the instructors said with a shit-eating grin plastered on his face. Yeah, looks like a reject could be used for entertainment at least. A female instructor nodded and finished the other statement. Naruto lost all emotion and his hands clenched into fists when she said that. The female's face paled when she realized what she did. Okay then, Naruto, here is your headband, Iruka said hurriedly to take the heat off of his fellow instructor. Report back here tomorrow morning for your team assignments. He inwardly sighed when Naruto smiled and unclenched his fists. The female instructor sunk into her chair and sent Iruka a thankful look. Iruka shook his head and packed up the rest of the headbands to put back into storage. 30 minutes later. Naruto was running back on the road back to the academy, hurrying so he could get back home to meet his two familiars before the shorter one mauled him for it and the taller one gave him the silent treatment. Well, silent for her at least. He grabbed his headband off his seat and was about to leap through the window when he heard voices. "So all I need to do is get a scroll to pass?" A confident voice asked, which Naruto had trouble putting a face to but could definitely tell it was a female. "That's right. Remember, if you get caught or tell anyone about it, you will automatically fail," a deep voice said before Naruto heard heavy footsteps trail away. He peered out of the corner to see that his assumption was correct and Tenten was mumbling to herself before walking away. Naruto's eyes narrowed and he started to stalk Tenten. He trusted Tenten and just wanted to make sure that she wasn't getting herself into trouble. Aside from whatever perverted ramblings came from a large fox and what appeared to be Naruto with reverse colors. After the man left unknown to Tenten, Naruto started stalking her. She gave herself a small pep talk before blushing, then going to do what always boosted her confidence. Follow Naruto. She went to his usual spots, the Forest of Death, Ichiraku, and his apartments, then almost collapsed into tears when she didn't find him anywhere. Naruto followed Naruto up to his apartment and tried to collect his jaw from the floor. The damn perverted fox had been right. She was stalking him. He found it a coincidence when she went to the same training ground and ran laps around the place. He found it a little unsettling how fast she ran toward his favorite restaurant, then asked the owners where he was. After some very vague charades, they managed to get his message that they hadn't seen him. And the fact that she almost dropped to the ground in tears when she found out he wasn't home was the last touch. Naruto shook himself, then got back into business mode as he saw Tenten run into the woods. He almost lost her a couple of times but found her outside the forbidden scroll holding place. He widened his eyes as she pulled a hook with a rope on it and swung it to the top of the wall. She climbed the rope and disappeared inside. A few minutes later she rappelled back down and dislodged her hook. She ran back into the woods and waited around to meet her instructor. She didn't wait long as Mizuki dropped down and smiled at her. "Good job, Tenten-san, you got the scroll." He congratulated her, clapping softly. Tenten smiled confidently and gave him a thumbs up. "That was super easy, Mizuki-sensei. So am I a ninja now?" she asked with stars in her eyes. She had been bummed about not passing, but Mizuki said that there was still one more way for her to become a ninja. Tenten, after having calmed down, understood the position that she and Naruto were in. She remembered that this scene from a book she read. She blushed when she remembered what came next. She prepared herself and looked up at Naruto and leaned in for the kiss until she heard a cough and realized that they weren't alone anymore. She looked over and saw the Hokage and jumped off of Naruto with a deep blush. "Naruto-kun, Hiraguchi-san," he said, getting their attention. "Can one of you explain what happened here?" he asked as he saw the forbidden scroll out in the open in Mizuki's head quite a distance from his body. One of the Anbu that arrived with him walked forward and put a hand on her shoulder when he noticed that her shirt was cut off. Tenten jumped away from the man's hand and attached back to Naruto's arm like it was her lifeline. The Hokage was the ruined shirt along with her reaction and pieced it together. "I need to schedule her appointment with one of the Yamanaka women since she seems to reject men, besides the one she is glued to." The Hokage thought with a little perverted giggle before he asked Naruto for the details, which he explained as best he could, with the occasional head nod from Tenten. The Hokage nodded, then escorted them back to his tower with the scroll back in its place with Anbu guarding it. The Hokage turned in his expensive leather chair to address the crowd of Chunin and Jonin in front of him. "So what I'm hearing is that a girl who failed her graduation test managed to sneak past a group of Chunin and Jonin to steal one of our heavily guarded scrolls and make off with it. What do you all have to say for yourselves?" he asked with a light glare on his face. "We're sorry, Hokage-sama," they all said together. The Hokage just sighed and sunk into his chair. The old man dismissed them with a wave of his hand, then turned to the two genins who seemed stuck together. "Hiraguchi-san still hasn't let go you yet?" he asked as he saw she was still stuck to his arm. Naruto shook his head and opened his mouth, but the words died in his throat when a massive blush appeared on his face. Tenten, however, looked ecstatic. She had gotten to sleep in the same bed with the boy she liked. They had walked home together and did what Tenten thought to be the best thing in her life. He cuddled with her. She was fine when she woke up but decided to milk it as long as she could. So Hiriguchi-chan, how are you feeling? The Hokage asked the girl attached to his surrogate grandson. Hiriguchi-san? The Hokage tried again. Tenten snuggled deeper into Naruto's arm. The Hokage shook his head then nodded to Naruto who leaned over and nipped Tenten's ear. Hiya. Tenten jumped off Naruto blushing stammering. Why did you do that? She said as she began to lightly pound on his arm. Well, the Hokage wanted you. He explained calmly with a small smile. All you had to do was shake me or something. She said as she sat on a chair pouting. Yeah, but I wanted to see your cute blushing face again. Naruto explained as he just kept smiling, which sent another blush to her face. The Hokage cleared his throat to get their attention and to disperse the mood in the room. Well, Hiriguchi-san, I wanted to let you know that I scheduled you with the Yamanakas after you meet your teams and get introduced. Speaking of which, isn't it about that time? He said, making Tenten pale as she looked at the clock. Crap. Tenten said as she started pacing the room. Naruto, she yelled, making the boy jump. You have some super amazing jutsu that can make us transport to the academy, right? Please say yes? She pleaded with tears in her eyes and latched onto him when he shook his head in the negative. The Hokage decided to take mercy on the girl, considering what she had been through, and got Naruto's attention. Naruto, you have my order to get Hiriguchi-san to the academy as fast as possible. Naruto dropped his jaw. Are you sure she can handle that, Oji-san? Naruto said, glancing back at Tenten. Tenten stood up and put her hands on her hips. I can handle anything you throw at me, she said with a confident smirk on her face. Naruto looked back at the Hokage, who thought for a minute. Half speed, he said, making Naruto smirk evilly and scoop up Tenten in a princess cradle, making her eep at the sudden movement. Naruto jumped out of the window and zoomed across the rooftops at a speed that made many of the Jonins look on with pride. The Hokage shook his head at Naruto's antics but understood why he did it. I'm glad that you understood me, Naruto-kun. I fear that you are the only one that can repair what happened to her. He thought sadly before he turned the chair around and tapped on the wall 3 times. A small panel turned around and deposited an orange book into his lap. He took his method of relaxation and turned to the marked page, giggling perversely again. With Naruto, Tenten looked on in awe after she got over the sheer horror of jumping over rooftops. She looked to Naruto, whose hair whipped around as he smiled down at her. She looked away to hide her blush for what seemed to be happening a lot when she was around Naruto. Naruto saw Tenten whip away and noticed that her face was red again. Maybe she has a fever. Tenten should take better care of herself. Naruto mused to himself as they landed in front of the academy. They rushed into the classroom right as the bell rang, which got everyone's attention. Naruto and Tenten noticed that people were pointing at them and whispering. Naruto, who is used to it, just tilted his head and went squint. 1. Tenten, however, was not as composed and slammed a hand on Iruka's desk. What? She shouted, making the entire class stare at her. You act like you haven't seen people rush in before. Ino and Sakura do it all the time, she shouted as Shino stood up and pushed his glasses up. The reason is that you are wearing Naruto-san's regular hoodie and he is in a muscle shirt. Shino pointed it and gestured to the females of the class who were drooling over Naruto. Tenten blushed and hid behind Naruto again, which sent the class into a frenzy as Iruka walked in. Everyone sit down and pay attention, Iruka shouted using his infamous demon head jutsu. When he got the class's attention, he nodded and pulled out a clipboard. Now then, since there are some problems with scheduling, the Hokage has only approved 4 teams for the time being. Those teams are as following. Team 7. Sakura Haruno, Sasuke Uchiha, a chorus of groans and a loud screech of happiness, and Scorch Kenpachi. Your sensei is Kakashi Hitaki, a red-haired boy groaned. Sensei, you are putting me with the Howler Monkey and the Emo King? Why do you hate me? He shouted and was ignored by Iruka. Team 8. Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, and Saitamaki. Your sensei is Kurenai Uehi. Kiba growled at not being put on Hinata's team but nodded to his 2 new teammates anyway. Team 10. Wait, sensei, you skipped 9. Sakura pointed out before going back to stare at Sasuke. Team 9 is still active as their sensei decided to hold them back a year. He explained before starting the list again. Sasuke snorted and Iruka just sighed and sat down waiting. They must suck if they got held back. Just like our dope, right Sai? he said with a smirk as Sai flashed him a fake smile and flipped him off. Anyway, Iruka said, ending the topic. The team consists of 3 prodigies. One a prodigy of the Hyuga. Hinata paled a little, a taijutsu expert. Scorch and Kiba shuddered. And what people are calling Konoha his weapons mistress. Tenten jumped at that and gripped whatever she was holding, which happened to be Naruto's arm, with insane strength. Back to the teams. Team 10. Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akamichi, and Ino Yamanaka. Your sensei is Asuma Sarutobi. Ino sighed at her luck as she got paired with the 2 laziest boys in class, and neither of the hunks. Team 11. Hinata Hyuga, Tenten Hiraguchi, and Naruto Uzumaki. Your sensei is Anko Mitarashi. Iruka gave a small prayer that Naruto didn't end up like his new sensei. A ball of smoke shattered the window and exploded, putting the new shinobi on guard while Iruka cried waterfalls of tears. The smoke cleared and revealed a sight that made the boys, except Shino, Sasuke and Naruto, fly back with nosebleeds. A woman with brown, pupil-less eyes wore a tan trench coat over a fishnet chestpiece and an orange skirt. She had purple hair styled like Shikamaru's and stood in front of a sign that read, "Anko Mitarashi is here." She obviously thought that it looked cool as she held up the peace sign and gave a very Naruto-like grin. "Anko, you're early," Iruka said, appearing from behind the sign, making Anko blush and cough to the side. Anyway, Team 8 follow me," she shouted and moved to jump out the window when Iruka grabbed her shoulder. "Did you forget your team?" he said as his infamous eyebrow twitch started again. "No," Akno said calmly as she tried again. "Team 9 inches," she said as Iruka shook his head. "Team 10? She asked, only to get another headshake. "Team 11? She asked sadly, but then perked up when he let go of her shoulder. "Follow me to training ground 44. She shouted and threw a smoke bomb on the ground, making Naruto's eyes light up and Iruka slumped down in defeat. Anko sat on the wire fence separating the village from one of the deadliest training grounds, second only to training ground 666. But then again, that place was so bad even Anko steered clear of it. Anko finished off the last of her dango and threw the stick into a wall, making her village's insignia. Naruto, Tenten and Hinata walked up on this scene, which Naruto whistled at. Anko smiled at the blonde boy, then stood to address her new recruits. "All right, now I'm sure you guys are ready to go on a mission, right?" she asked, getting nods from Naruto and Tenten, which Hinata followed with hesitatingly. "You guys ready to go take on S-ranked ninja?" she shouted, raising her fist in the air, which Naruto copied exactly. "Well, too bad," she said, making Naruto fall face first into the grass, making everyone else laugh at his expense. "Why did you get as hyped then, Ero-sensei?" Naruto shouted, pointing a finger at her. She merely smiled and threw a kunai at him, grazing his cheek. Anko appeared behind him and licked the blood that her kunai drew. "It's the loud, hot-headed ones that are my favorite," she whispered into his ear. "They usually have so much energy." She finished off, getting ready to laugh at his blush, however she blushed when he turned and licked her cheek back. "And the crazy ones are usually the best lays," he countered, making her blush and appear back on the fence. "Naruto-kun, what was that?" Tenten grabbed Naruto's shoulder and gave him a sweet smile. Naruto started sweating bullets and decided to do the only thing he could think of. Blamed Jiraiya. "Well, you see, it was a strategy that my godfather taught me." He lied through his teeth and almost sighed when Tenten retracted her hand and let the smile drop a little. Hinata glared at her new sensei and teammate for getting too close to her Naruto. "Those whores. How dare they try to seduce my Naruto-kun? They can't even see how much he is in love with me." Hinata thought before she decided to voice her opinion. Excuse me. Could you ple?" she started to say before Anko shouted at the two to seat on some logs near the fence. "All right, since we wasted some time earlier," she paused to glare at Naruto, who sheepishly chuckled. "Let's just get to team introductions, so tell us a bit about you," Anko said as she pulled out another box of dango and got a stick. "Why don't you show us how it is done, sensei?" Tenten asked as Anko resisted the urge to curse her out for interrupting her eating time. "Fine, my name is Anko Mitarashi. My likes are snakes, dango and sharp objects. My dislikes are a certain bastard, stupid people and assumptions. My hobbies are none of your business, and my dreams are for me to share when I want." "Your turn, Ms. Rabbit," she said, pointing at Hinata, also giving an idea for a certain fox to bookmark away for later. Hinata took a deep breath to prevent stuttering as much as she could. My name is Hinata Hyuga. My likes are gardening and looks at Naruto who doesn't get it. My dislikes are mean people, seeing people in pain and those who look down on others. My hobbies are pressing flowers, and my dream is to remove the seal from my clan with a certain someone's help. Okay, from what Kurenai said that seems right. I have got to work on her confidence though, thought Anko when Hinata finished. My name is Naruto Death Uzumaki. He started making everyone pause about his middle name. Anko made a note to confront the Hokage about it. My like are ramen, my scythe and long hair. My dislikes are the time it takes to cook ramen, people who make fun of others and clowns. Wait, clowns? Anko asked as Naruto nodded as his eyes steeled. If I ever see another clown again, I will beat it within an inch of its life and anyone who tries to stop me. Naruto said before his eyes lightened up. Anyway, my hobbies are training, learning jutsus and making more jutsus. My dreams are to become Hokage and have a big family to restore my mom's clan. Wait, Naruto, you know your mom? Tenten asked carefully since the last time someone brought up Naruto's mother, they soon left for the hospital with head trauma, 2 broken arms and 6 fractured ribs. The Hokage cleared up the misunderstanding and said the boy was harassing Naruto. No one believed it but nobody spoke up. Naruto nodded and stood in front of his new team. You guys know what happened 13 years ago? Naruto started before Anko yelled his name. Naruto, are you sure you want to tell them? That is a secret for a reason. She asked, scared the blonde was being too hasty. Naruto waved her off. I've known them since we were kids. They're 2 of my closet friends. He stated, making the 2 girls blush deeply. Anyway, you guys know how sealing works, right? He waited, getting nods from both girls before continuing. Well, you guys know what happened on my birthday, right? Yeah, that was when the 4th Hokage killed the Kyuubi, right? Tenten asked, leaning forward in suspense, unknowingly giving Naruto a good look at her developed chest through his hoodie she was wearing. Well, the Kyuubi can't be killed but he can be sealed. He is what is called a biju and they can only be sealed into newborns normally. Naruto paused, letting them fill in the dots, which Hinata got first and gasped. Why, you are the Kyuubi? She shouted, pointing at Naruto who looked down sadly. Naruto heard movement and braced himself when he heard a loud smack. He looked up in shock only to see that Tenten had slapped Hinata. He is not the Kyuubi. Tenten shouted with rage in her eyes. He is a sweet boy who had a very bad burden shoved onto him. I thought you saw more than that. She finished sadly as Anko decided to end the meeting before Hinata ran off. Meet me back here tomorrow at 9 o'clock for your test, and you may not want to eat breakfast. Anko disappeared in a swirl of leaves while Hinata walked off sadly. Naruto started to go after her but could only see the disgust in her eyes when she screamed at him. He felt a pair of slender arms wrap around him and 2 soft mounds press into his back. I don't know what you are feeling right now, but no matter what happens I will be there for you. Tenten said as Naruto turned around and hugged her back. Thank you, Tenten, you have always been there for me. He said as they stared into each other's eyes and leaned forward before a crow cawed and pecked at Naruto's head. Naruto had an idea what exactly was happening and tried to wave the crow off, which started pecking twice as hard. Naruto sighed and sent Tenten an apologetic look before he ran off, leaving Tenten to stomp around like a child mumbling about stupid crows ruining the mood. When Naruto got home, the crow flew off his head and was wrapped in a green shroud before turning into a girl wearing a pair of baggy jeans and a tight green shirt to show off her developing bust, which she slightly leaned over to show the blonde in front of her. Naruto looked on with a bored look as he addressed the girl that the crow changed into. Dust, what are you doing? The girl scoffed and turned away from Naruto. Dust? Naruto tried again only to get ignored again. Fidget, he said as the girl whipped back to him and battered her eyelashes. Yes, Foxy-kun? She asked as Naruto turned to hide his blush from the cuteness Fidget displayed. When did she get so cute? Naruto thought before he pushed the blush down. Where is despair? He asked as she sighed and gave up looking cute. You know we don't like those names. Those were the names that our old master gave us, besides I like this name better. She asked before Naruto nodded and rephrased the question. Where is Midori then? He asked before his face was pushed into something. Why did Fidget throw pillows at me? Thought Naruto, who grabbed the pillow and realized something. Wait, when do pillows hug you and moan? Naruto squeezed one more time to confirm something. Yep. Boobs this size have to be Midori's, was Naruto's last thought before he blacked out from loss of blood. Midori ran in and glomped Naruto, who proceeded to knead her ass before passing out in them. Midori smiled and hugged him, tired as she thought they were so soft he could sleep on them. Fidget scoffed before leaving for her own apartment next door, mumbling something about big-head demons ruining everything. Midori laid Naruto down in his bed before leaving to her apartment on the other side of Fidget's. Both girls got ready for bed, wishing they could sneak into Naruto's apartment and cuddle with him. Fidget got dressed after her shower in some pajamas with cute little chicks all over it. She sat at her desk and pulled out a book and opened up to a random page titled, Torture Techniques, and started writing while chuckling evilly. Midori was dressed in a solid purple gown that was tied with a pink sash. She sat on her desk and started making a to-do list for tomorrow. She sighed as she knew Naruto was going to freak out when they explained what happened. She pushed her list to the side for now and started cuddling her Naruto plushie. As Naruto lay in his bed, he was soon assaulted with very vivid images of all the girls in his life dressed in skimpy bunny suits. Naruto laid there till morning with a wide smile and a nosebleed. With Tenten, Tenten threw another kunai into a picture of a crow, then sighed as she gave up her rage, for now. She let her hair down, which fell to the middle of her back, and recalled when Naruto said he liked long hair. She smiled widely before giving a small squeal of joy, but then remembered Hinata and how she acted with Naruto when he told them his news. She frowned and wondered if she should apologize to the Hyuga heiress the next day. After pondering that for a moment, she went back to the time when she and Naruto almost kissed and squealed again. A few doors down, Tenten's dad sighed before pulling out a pair of earmuffs before going to sleep. With Hinata, Hinata sat in front of her father's desk with eyes that showed unwavering determination. Hinata's father Hiyashi was pleasantly surprised as he had not seen those eyes on her since her mother died. Hiyashi hid his smile and took a sip of his tea before addressing his daughter again. Now Hinata, are you sure? I can do this for you, but you know that it would cause problems, right? In fact, your relationship may never be the same. I know Uzumaki-san trusted you enough to reveal his secret, but are you sure you want to do this? He asked a final time, knowing of Hinata's crush on said blonde. Hinata thought for a moment before she nodded. I know he trusted me, and this is the choice I want to take. Hiyashi sighed and nodded after a moment. All right then, tomorrow I will ask the Hokage to seal your memories of Uzumaki-san and request a team change. He confirmed as she bowed and walked off. Minato, I am truly sorry, but I don't think our kids will end up together like we planned. Hiyashi thought sadly as he wrote the information on a letter and sending via Ninja Hawk. Hiyashi sat for a while before activating his Byakugan and scanning around him. Seeing the coast was clear, he activated a seal on his desk and pulled out a book with an orange cover. He put on his reading glasses before flipping to a marked page and giving a small uncharacteristic giggle. The next day, Naruto and Tenten were sitting next to each other on a tree stump pointing out some clouds. Naruto laughed when they saw one that looked like a snake and thought of something he noticed from yesterday. Hey Tenten, yesterday during the introductions you didn't mention your hobby. Naruto pointed out, making her blush and look away. No, I'm pretty sure that I told my hobby yesterday, she said as she tried to go back to cloud watching. Then what was it? Naruto asked again. Tenten mumbled something that Naruto didn't hear. What was that, Ten-chan? Tenten shot up and whipped around to face him while blushing intensely. Why does that matter anyway? She almost shouted at Naruto, who kept a calm stare. Because I want to know more about you, he said with a small smirk, making her sigh and look down in defeat. I collect stuffed animals, she said shyly, hoping he wouldn't laugh. Naruto sat up looking at her in confusion. Stuffed animals? Naruto busted into laughter, making Tenten twitch in anger. What is so funny? She asked with that twisted smile again as she plopped down in his lap. Naruto kept chuckling for a moment before he looked her in the eyes with a small smile. I just never expected it to be such a cute hobby coming from you, Naruto said with a small chuckle, making her pout. And what do you mean by that? Naruto leaned back and laid her head down on his chest. Tenten smiled a little when her head hit the blonde's chest. I just never guess it would be collecting stuffed animals, Naruto confessed when a blushing Anko jumped down from the tree and held a kunai out. Who told you? She asked Naruto angrily. Naruto and Tenten shared a confused glance before looking back to their sensei. Told me what? Naruto asked as he subconsciously started stroking Tenten's head, making the girl sigh and nuzzle deeper into his chest. Anko shot Tenten a jealous glance that neither teenager caught before going back to the topic at hand. Who told you I collected stuffed animals? Anko asked with a glare, making Naruto and Tenten share another glance, only this time to go rolling around on the floor laughing. Why you collect stuffed animals, Ero-sensei? Naruto asked after he and Tenten calmed down some. Anko nodded before looking at Naruto in confusion. I was talking about Ten-chan's hobby. He explained, making the purple-haired woman drop her jaw before straightening up and blushing even more. Ignoring that, she started, still holding out the kunai in case one of the teenagers wanted to go farther into the topic. I have some bad news about Hinata. Naruto whipped around faster than anyone saw while Tenten looked on with an uninterested stare. Is Hinata-chan okay? Naruto asked, concerned about one of his few friends. Anko held his lips shut so she could finish her news. Since one of your classmates, Saitamaki, I believe, has dropped out of the ninja program, Hinata has been moved to a tracking team rather than an assassination team. She finished and released Naruto's lips, which just remained silent. I bet she did this because she didn't want to be on the team with the demon. Naruto thought before looking down sadly. Tenten saw this and decided to put her plan into motion after the team meeting. So until the Hokage decides someone else to put into your team, you will be a two-man cell for now. Now then, even if you lost a teammate, you still have to carry out your mission, so we are still going to have your test today. Naruto perked up at the thought of training, and Tenten cheered up when she saw Naruto wasn't feeling so bad. Your mission is to find and bring me the corpse of 5 animals in the forest, Anko explained when Naruto scoffed. Is that it? It's way too easy, sensei. Naruto bragged, making Anko smile angrily. Alright then, brat, as an extra rule, they can't have any wounds below the neck, nor can you use weapons, and they can only be big predators, she said, making Naruto sigh as Tenten smacked him on his head to keep his big mouth shut. Anko smiled sadistically and pulled out a timer and set it up. You have 2 hours until the timer goes off. Gone, she said, and the two sped off into the forest. Anko chuckled at the two and sat down on a nearby log. I wonder if those two are going to get the animals, she thought to herself before pulling out her copy of an orange book. In the forest, Naruto and Tenten were hopping through the trees following the river, hoping to see some kind of easy predators, as the giant snake that tried to eat them earlier might have been a little too much. Tenten looked over at Naruto, who led them, and saw a look of concentration on his face and smiled before she got a confident smile on hers. Now that Naruto-kun is serious, there is no way that we can lose, she thought, unaware of the pair of eyes that opened when they passed by. Naruto sighed to himself as he couldn't find any animals even with his senses open. He was about to start demolishing the forest when his tenants decided to add their input. Kid, if you go to the right about 100 yards, there is a clearing with at least 3 or 4 animals in it. If you use a little of my chakra, then you can kill them, no problem. Kyuubi said. He walked outside one of the huts in his village, leaving behind a bed full of satisfied demons. Yeah, but I would rather not kill them, Kyuubi. These animals haven't done anything to make me kill them, Naruto thought before Shin offered his input. Well, if you were to use my energy to subdue them, I can say that you would not kill them, rather subdue them, Shin said as he meditated in a field. What do you mean, subdue them? Naruto asked. He led Tenten into the direction of the clearing. Well, they will go unconscious, but I cannot say if they would try to attack you when they awaken or if they submit themselves to you. Naruto thought about it for a while before pulling out a little of Shin's energy. Naruto's hair now had black highlights and his eyes were now purple instead of the usual blue. Tenten saw the new changes to Naruto and was about to ask him, but remembered how hurt he was when Hinata reacted to it, so Tenten wrote it off as the Kyuubi, as Tenten trusted him to know what he was doing. Naruto and Tenten jumped down into the clearing, startling what animals were there, having a stare down already. The ninjas were now facing down a gorilla, a jaguar, an owl and an anaconda. This normally wouldn't have been a problem for the two, but considering that they were forbidden to nothing but headshots and didn't even have weapons to do it with, which severely limited them, not to mention that the animals were much larger than their normal relatives. The gorilla ran at Naruto, beating its chest and smacked its fists on the ground, but Naruto jumped out of the way just in time for the owl to swoop over and scratch the gorilla's eye. Naruto ran around the flailing gorilla and jumped onto one of its arms, which he used to springboard onto the owl, and injected it with some of Shin's energy. The owl tried to shake off the blonde at first but slowly started dropping to the ground until it crashed and threw the blonde next to it. Naruto regained his senses just in time to see the gorilla charging him and prepared to smash the owl. Naruto clicked his teeth in frustration before intercepting the gorilla's smash by reinforcing his arms with chakra. Holy crap, this was a bad idea. Naruto mentally berated himself until he felt the gorilla let up on the force and raise his arms while Naruto held onto his arm before latching onto his head, repeating the same process with the owl. Once the gorilla was down for the count, Naruto made 15 clones to carry the two out before something else stole his prize. Once that was done, Naruto turned to Tenten, who was having a hard time evading the two agile animals. Naruto made another clone that launched him at the anaconda, which must have noticed because it turned around and tried to snatch the blonde snack in midair. Naruto unhooked his scythe and pushed it against the ground, launching him higher over the snake, making him land on its back. The anaconda tried to turn to get the pesky blonde, who keeps weaving in and out of its tail repeatedly until after a short time the anaconda was tied into a knot, giving Naruto easy access to inject it with some energy. He then turned to help Tenten, who he saw had the jaguar tied in a thick coil of wire. "Where did you get the wire?" Naruto asked as he knocked the jaguar out, then made clones to carry the other two animals out. Tenten winked at him and shook her finger. "That's a woman's secret, Naruto-kun. Anyway, how did you knock out those animals?" Naruto looked at her in disbelief as Tenten looked on with a not-so-innocent smile. "Vulcan pinch," Naruto said, repeating what Shin told him to say as Tenten raised an eyebrow but shrugged since it got the job done. Naruto walked back to the other side of the training field when something lashed out at him. Naruto tried to roll out of the way but still ended up getting a gash in the leg. Tenten heard the commotion and tried to set another trap, only for the thing to run straight through it. Naruto walked next to Tenten and watched as the animal came to a halt and saw what looked like a large red feline with armor plating instead of fur. "Naruto, that is a stalker," Shin yelled, jumping up from his meditating position as he saw one of his old foes now facing the new horseman. "What is that exactly?" Naruto thought as he watched the creature circle around him and Tenten, who looked absolutely terrified. "It is a feline creature that is highly aggressive and won't stop until it has its kill," Shin explained as Naruto nodded. The stalker noticed the moment of hesitation in Naruto, then curled into a ball and charged the unknowing blonde. Naruto saw armored ball approaching him and braced for the impact when Tenten shoved him out of the way. For Naruto, everything slowed down as he was thrown to the side. He saw Tenten smile sadly at him before turning back to the deadly ball approaching her. "Tenten!" Naruto shouted as he saw the girl he loved about to be ripped to shreds thrust her arms out. Tenten hoped to whoever was listening that the ball stopped and waited for the pain. After a moment she opened one eye and noticed that the ball was spinning in place. She raised her arms and noticed that the ball went with her arms. She turned to Naruto and gave a big smile. Naruto let out a sigh before standing up. He looked at Tenten, who gave him a thumb up, then looked back to the ball, which resumed its course for her. Naruto pulled out massive amounts of Shin's energy when something started forming in his hands. Naruto was running purely on instinct when he whipped his arm out and aimed something at the ball and fired some kind of projectile into the ball, which swerved off to the side into the tree line. Naruto ran forward and grabbed Tenten, who had almost fallen, and pulled her into a tight hug. Tenten smiled when the blonde hugged her. "It's okay, Naruto, I'm fine," she assured him, but was shocked when he stood up in rage. "How could you be so stupid? I was fine, I didn't need to. You push me out of the way," Naruto shouted at Tenten, who narrowed her eyes before looking into his. Tenten's rage disappeared when she saw panic, sadness and worry in his eyes. Tenten just stood up and hugged him again when she felt something wet fall onto her shoulder. Tenten held the crying Naruto for a while before he calmed down and looked at her. "Tenten, I realized something when I saw that thing getting closer to you. I like you, Tenten, and I don't want you to get hurt because of me," Naruto confessed to her, looking into her eyes. Tenten was surprised to say the least at his confession. "I like you too, Naruto, in fact I was going to ask you out after this," she admitted with a small blush, though that blush was replaced with a more intense blush when Naruto kissed her straight on the lips. After what seemed to be an eternity for them both, They separated for air while both were blushing madly. After repeating the kiss a few more times, Tenten finally broke the cycle. "So what does this mean?" asked Tenten, that still was unable to calm herself down. "I guess this means we are together?" Naruto tried and got a huge smile when Tenten nodded happily. Naruto then pushed Tenten behind him and assumed a taijutsu stance when the stalker emerged from the tree line. The stalker then ran forward and jumped over Naruto and landed by Tenten. Naruto was about to decapitate the stalker when he realized that it was rubbing on his new girlfriend like a regular cat would. Naruto and his two tenants were at a loss for words while Tenten adapted to the situation instantly. "Ah, that's a good kitty," she said, stroking the stalker, getting it to purr. Tenten looked at the massive cat before thinking for a bit. "Can you understand me?" The stalker stopped purring and looked at her. Is there any way you could become smaller?" The stalker looked at itself before shaking itself from head to toe, retracting its armor plates and becoming what looked like a slightly larger than average leopard. "I am going to call you Karuta," she said while the stalker purred, signaling that it approved the name. "Why Karuta?" Naruto asked, making Tenten look at him while she tried to climb onto Karuta's back. "Well, I think it's a nice name and it can cover itself in metal, like it was armor," Tenten explained, making Naruto nod dumbly before Tenten tried to help him up before Karuta hissed at him. "I don't think she likes you, Naruto-kun." Naruto sighed and signaled for her to go ahead, then started running back while having a chat with his two inhabitants. "Shin, the fuck?" Naruto shouted at the old horseman, who pondered it for a moment before giving his input. "Well, it could seem that since your ally could control the stalker at least for a short while, it knew she was powerful before you subdued it." "Well, that or it's just a bitch," Shin explained, making Kyuubi burst into laughter at the last part, especially since Shin had to explain to his daughter what a switch was since she snuck into the conversation. "Also, do you know what this is?" Naruto looked at the strange object in his hands so the two in his mind could see. "Yes, I do, and I thought it highly unlikely that the other horsemen would give you their powers so easily. It would appear that the council is surveying you, and my brother, Strife, has accepted you as you are holding his gun, redemption, now," Shin explained, silently cursing the power-hungry council. "Holy shit, Kit's got a gun. Better keep that hidden, Kit, because most ninjas don't like it when someone is packing heat with a cylinder," Kyuubi said, giving his impression on guns. "He means that guns are extremely dangerous, especially this one," Shin translated, making Kyuubi scoff. "Before you went to be a good ruler and satisfy his people. What makes this gun so special?" Naruto asked as he sealed it away for the time being. "You will just have to find out in due time. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to explain to my daughter some of the words you said," Shin said with a glare. "Oh crap baskets. Sorry Shin, how old is she anyway, 6? Naruto wondered before he got a final reply. "No, she is 12, just a year under you. There is a reason you got those lessons," Shin said before he cut the connection and making Naruto get a shiver up his back. Naruto landed at the campsite to see not only Tenten but also Anko stroking Karuta's fur, with said cat feeling like royalty. "Welcome back, brat," Anko said, still petting Karuta and looking at him. "I see you guys managed to get the 5 animals, so I guess you pass," she said before Naruto and Tenten enveloped each other in a big hug. Anko smiled and pointed at the two with an empty dango stick she pulled out. "So I take it something good happened in the forest?" she asked, only to get nods, then pouted from their lack of emotion. "Make sure to meet me in the Hokage Tower bright and early for your first mission," she said as she poofed away. "Our old classmates invited to eat at the restaurant Choji's parents own. Should we tell them the good news?" Tenten said as she wrapped her arms around his and leaned her head on his shoulder. Naruto blushed when she did it, as he could now feel 2 soft mounds on his arm. "Which good news, the team or this?" he said, raising their intertwined hands. Tenten thought for a moment before shrugging and leaning back on his shoulder. "Let's go drop Karuta off first, then we can tell them both," Tenten said as Naruto nodded. The couple walked in comfortable silence down the village, ignoring the glares that the civilians gave the two. Some were happy for the new couple and said congratulations quietly as they passed by. Tenten was ecstatic to be dating her crush like she was right now, and the same could be said for Naruto if the goofy smile on his face was anything to go by. After dropping off Karuta at Tenten's house and explaining to her dad what a leopard was doing following her around, The couple now stood in front of the meeting place and hesitated to go inside. Naruto was shaking slightly as he thought that he would see Hinata there, only to find out that she told their classmates that he was the Kyuubi, only for them to freak out and attack him with weapons and various jutsus. He would have gone deeper into his delusions, but Tenten squeezed his hand, assuring him. Naruto gave Tenten a thankful glance, then took a deep breath and walked into the building. Naruto looked around for their table when he heard a squeal and felt something latch onto his back. "Hey there, Ino-chan," Naruto said, turning around and giving her a smile. Tenten gave the clingy girl a heated glare which she shrugged off. "Hey Naruto-kun," she said as she hugged him one last time before letting go of him. "Come on, you two are the last two to arrive," Ino said as she led the two to the table where everyone was seated. When Naruto and Tenten walked to the table, they noticed that two people were missing from the group. "Where is Sakura-san and Sasuke Teme?" Naruto said, sitting with Tenten on his lap at the end of the table. "Sasuke-san is off training and Sakura-san, following Sasuke like usual," Shikamaru stated with a yawn. "But more importantly, when did this happen?" Ino asked with an eyebrow twitching in annoyance as she pointed towards him where Tenten was resting comfortable in his chest. "Today," Tenten almost sighed out dreamily as Naruto wrapped an arm around her while he started drinking his water with his other arm. "Naruto, you sly fox, you," Kiba said with a large grin, making Naruto spit out the water, which happened to be in Shino's direction. The entire table went quiet as Shino sat there quietly. Shino slowly got up, then motioned for Naruto to get up as well. Shino walked outside the restaurant with Naruto walking hesitantly behind him. After a while Shino came back with dry clothes and Naruto had a fearful look in his eyes. "What's wrong, Naru-kun?" Tenten asked as Naruto sat down next to her. Naruto just shook his head and sat in silence. After a few moments Naruto composed himself and looked around the table. "So how did everyone do on their tests?" Naruto asked as his eyes circled around the table. Taking the hint Ino started since she was right next to him, much to Tenten's displeasure. "Well, Shika-kun, Choji-kun and I had to follow some jonin around and get some information on them. We tried on this one purple-haired lady, but Choji was almost hit with a kunai when we got to close, so we left her alone," she explained as all three in the group shuddered at the thought of the purple-haired woman, making Naruto and Tenten send them sympathetic glances. "Well, I had to take 2 bells for Bakakashi sensei with my 2 teammates, and we almost didn't pass," Scorch said with a sigh as he leaned back. The table looked at him, waiting for him to finish the story, making him sweat drop as he thought he was done. "Sakura-san passed out from a genjutsu, Sasuke Teme got buried, and I was hung up from a tree, and then let's not talk about it." He finished off, getting strange looks when he grimaced. "How did you pass?" Choji asked as he finally stopped shoveling food down his throat long enough to pass. "When noon passed and we still didn't get the bells, Bakakashi sensei tied Sakura-san to a log and gave me and the Teme food. After telling us not to share with her, we saw how hungry she was and shared anyway. Sensei came back saying we passed and spouting off something about teamwork." Scorch finished off with a sheepish grin while everyone stared at him in disbelief. Naruto shook his head and sighed as Kakashi was sounding exactly like Jiraiya described him. "We had to break out of a B-rank genjutsu, then track down a missing child, which we completed easily," boasted Kiba, puffing his chest out, making everyone roll their eyes except Naruto, who was trying to make contact with a brunette that was intent on avoiding him. "Naruto-san, how did you and Tenten-san pass your test?" Shino asked, making Naruto pale slightly and remain silent, leaving Tenten to answer the question. "Well, we are now a 2-man squad since someone decided to change teams," Tenten explained with a pause to glare at Hinata, who shot up and slammed the table. "That was the Hokage's orders, Hiraguchi-san," Hinata uncharacteristically shouted with a heated glare at Tenten, who shrugged it off. "I didn't say it was or it wasn't, anyway. Before I was interrupted, Naruto-kun and I had to go into training ground number 44 and capture 5 animals," she said before she was interrupted again, only this time by the bubbly blonde she was sitting next to. "That's it? Man, you guys got it good," Ino mused with a jealous glance. "For the love of Kami, let me finish, people," Tenten shouted angrily, making everyone sit down quietly. "Now if I can finish." "But what about?" Naruto started with a small smile before Tenten shot a venomous glare at him. "What was that, Naruto-kun?" Tenten asked with the same sickly, sweet smile from yesterday. Naruto just gave her a smile before kissing her forehead, calming the beast known as vengeance, at least for now. That's what it was at first, before Naruto-kun decided to open his big bragging mouth. In the end we had to catch 5 predators without wounding them in the slightest. Tenten said, making it sound as if it was nothing. The rest of the table stared with their jaws on the ground at the couple's achievements. Isn't that place supposed to be filled with dangerous animals? Shikamaru asked as the two nodded with big smiles on their faces. I don't believe you, there is no way that a dobi like Naruto caught 5 dangerous animals. I would probably handle it with no problem. Kiba accused as the temperature dropped a couple of degrees. Kiba, are you calling Ten-chan a liar? Naruto said with his hair shadowing his eyes. Kiba felt a chill go up his spine but dismissed it as he scoffed off Naruto's threat. Yeah, I called her a liar, what are you going to do about it? Kiba asked, inching his hand towards his kunai pouch in case the blonde decided to lunge at him. Kiba was about to pull one out when he felt cold steel on his neck and saw another Naruto holding a green scythe up to his neck. The real Naruto stood up with Tenten, placed some money on the table and walked out, leaving the clone to poof away, making everyone stare at each other in fright before leaving their separate ways. The old mood destroyed by Kiba and Naruto's contest. You know you didn't have to do that? Tenten asked as he was currently walking her home. Naruto sighed and wrapped his arm around her waist while she repeated the action. I know, I just didn't like the way he talked to you. Naruto pouted and pulled her a little closer. Tenten smiled at the action then yawned. Naru-kun, can you take me home? She looked up at him with a pleading look. Naruto sighed when he saw the look. You just want to be carried like a princess, don't you? Naruto asked with a glance only to see a guilty look on her face. If that is what the princess wants. Naruto said as he swept her into a bridal carry and applied chakra to his feet to get to Tenten's house faster. When they arrived, Tenten had fallen asleep in Naruto's arms. So after he handed her off to her dad and wished him good night, he was walking back to his apartment. Naruto pulled out redemption from his back pocket and inspected it. Naruto decided to see how the pistol worked, so head turned to go in the direction of his favorite training ground. After a short walk, Naruto walked into a small clearing and pulled out redemption. After placing a sound barrier, he aimed the pistol at a tree and pulled the trigger. A sudden crack erupted from the gun, shattering the poor boy's sensitive ears. Son of Kyuubi, that's loud. Naruto yelled as he fell to the ground, clutching his bleeding ears. After a short mumble of curses of the gun later, his ears healed and he stood up to see it. The bullet had gone through. The bullet had broken the tree in half, also leaving a large hole at the point of impact. Whatever I said about this gun I take back, this thing is awesome. Naruto said as the kissed the side of the gun before he sealed it away into a scroll. Shin, this gun is awesome. I can be unstoppable with this thing. Naruto thought with a foxy grin as he couldn't wait to use it. Not exactly, the old horseman said, putting Naruto's plans on hold. That is a demonic gun, so it would only work on demons or something of a similar nature. Though it could be used on humans, it wouldn't be as lethal. Shin pointed out, expecting the boy to be downtrodden, and to his surprise the boy didn't seem that fazed by it. What did you expect me to go around shooting people, Shin? Only Sasuke Teme, and he counts more like a duck's ass because of that hairstyle. Naruto thought with a slight chuckle as he imagined Sasuke at gunpoint. Pushing that disturbing thought aside, let's focus on the next part of your training. When you master this, we can move on to the techniques that consume wrath. Wrath? Wrath is what is used to use most of my techniques and summon a friend. Shin said, ending that topic much to Naruto's frustration. The first step is reaching into yourself and pulling on your angry. Won't that pull out Kurama's chakra as well? Naruto asked worriedly as he didn't want to pull on the fox's chakra lest he be swarmed by frightened ninja happy to end his life. My chakra works on your rage. All of that beautiful rage you have bottled up wanting to rip the village apart. Kurama said almost dreamily as he pictured it until Naruto cleared his throat, pulling him out of his delusion. Anyway, just pull on your emotions you learned to repress, like your anger and your sense of humor. Kurama said, mumbling the last part to himself. Naruto stood still as he reached for the feeling. After a while he grabbed it, pulled on it. Making memories of when he was at the village flood into his mind. Not noticing that his rage was coming with his anger, Naruto pulled harder. He kept pulling until Kurama and Shin forced Naruto to sever the connection. Naruto tried again only to fail as badly as the first time. Why can't I get this? Naruto thought in frustration until he had an idea and thought of all the things he hated and how Kiba made him feel earlier tonight. Pulling on this feeling, Naruto successfully pulled his anger out and watched as it floated up in his mindscape until it looked like a purple sun in the sky. Very good. Now the next step would be to imagine picking up the tree. Naruto focused and did as Shin instructed. He gasped when a pair of large orange arms formed out of thin air and grabbed the tree and tried to lift it. He lost focus and the arms flicked out as fast as they arrived. What was that? Naruto asked, slightly spooked at the floating arms not attached to a body. That was one of my most useful techniques. You can conjure a pair of arms to help you access things you normally can't. If you learned this like you learned the other things, you should have it down in a week that you can start on whatever the old fox has planned for you. I'll kill you, horseman. Kurama growled out at the crack at his age. The giant fox capable of flattening mountains was sensitive about his age, who knew? You can't kill death, Shin said with a small smirk. Kurama wished he had better flexibility in his claws so he could flip the horseman off. By the end of the month you are going to have up to the three-tailed cloak mastered, Kurama said with no room for argument. Naruto sighed and just started on his training. 1 month later, Naruto sighed as his team walked into the Hokage's office after their recent completion of a D-rank mission. Good job, Team 11. That makes for another mission complete, he said as a hawk flew in the window and landed on his desk. The old man's eyes narrowed as he read the scroll he pulled of the hawk's leg. Team 11, you have another mission, he said as Naruto groaned. Don't tell me, the fire daimyo's wife's cat ran away again, Naruto said with a bored look his face. Not at all, Team 7 is requesting support in a mission in the Wave Country. This is counted as a C-rank mission based on what Hitaki-san has informed me of. You are to be departed in 1 hour, he said as they nodded then walked out. Tenten and Anko ran home to pack and Naruto disappeared into a portal of swirling energy. A similar portal appeared in his living room and he stepped out. He grabbed his scroll and sent 2 clones to inform Fidget and Midori they had a trip. He stepped out the building to see Fidget leap out of a window and transform into who Shin called dust. He saw Midori 2 windows down and saw her nod signaling that she was ready to be summoned at any time. Naruto walked to the gate and waited a while before seeing both his teammate and sensei arrive. Anko raised an eyebrow at the boy who she saw waiting there. Where is your gear, Naruto? Anko asked before smiling sadistically, ready to punish the boy if he forgot his gear. To her surprise, which she hid well, Naruto didn't even flinch like he would a month ago. Instead he merely pointed to a scroll on his back. I sealed it away into sealing scrolls 1 made, like I did with Ten-chan's gear. Naruto explained and instantly regretted when Anko got stars in her eyes. You are now to do that with all the team's gear, she shouted happily as she wouldn't have to buy sealing scrolls, or carry her own gear anymore. Naruto sighed and nodded before Anko smiled wider then took off into the trees with her team following her. Naruto tried to ignore the pit he felt in his stomach. Hang on guys, Naruto thought as the sense of dread got worse by the passing second.